Some secrets are worth dying for, but this grandmother was ready to kill to protect hers. When Montana rancher Rhett Dawson pulled a bleeding stranger from a blizzard on Christmas Eve, he thought he was saving a life. He had no idea he was inviting a war into his home. The woman clutching stolen documents to her chest wasn't just running from the cold. She was running from a monster who'd destroyed her family, stolen babies, and buried the truth under lies and money. Now that monster was coming for her. And Rhett's children? They were standing right in the crossfire. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The wind didn't howl in Montana, it screamed. It tore across the prairie like something alive and furious, ripping at everything that dared stand in its path. Snow didn't fall so much as it attacked, horizontal sheets of white that turned the world into a churning, freezing hell. And somewhere in the middle of that hell, Rhett Dawson rode his fence line alone. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Tucker, plodded forward with the resigned patience of an animal that had survived too many Montana winters to be surprised by one more. Rhett sat deep in the saddle, his coat collar turned up against the cold, his hat pulled low. Ice had formed in his beard, making his jaw ache. His hands, even in leather gloves, had gone numb an hour ago. He was 43 years old, and he felt every year of it in weather like this. The fence posts appeared and disappeared in the swirling white like ghosts. Rhett counted them, checked them, moved on. It was mindless work, the kind that let a man's thoughts wander to places they shouldn't go. To a woman's laugh that he'd never hear again. To the way the house felt too big and too quiet now. To 3 children who looked at him like they were waiting for him to figure out how to be both parents at once. Sarah had been gone 18 months. The grief was supposed to get easier. That's what people said. What they didn't tell you was that easier just meant you got better at carrying it, not that the weight ever actually lessened. Tucker's ears swiveled forward suddenly, and the horse stopped. Rhett looked up, pulled from his thoughts. "What is it, boy?" The horse snorted, his breath a cloud of steam. He was staring at something ahead, something Rhett couldn't see through the snow. Then Rhett saw it too. A shape, dark against the white, moving. His first thought was cattle. One of the herd had wandered too far, gotten separated. It happened. But as Tucker moved closer, Rhett's hand drifted to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. The shape was too small to be a cow, too upright, too human. Jesus Christ, Rhett breathed. It was a person. A woman, stumbling through snow that came up past her knees, moving with the desperate failing rhythm of someone at the very end of their strength. She wore no coat, just a thin dress that must have been blue once but was now soaked dark with snow and something else. Something red. Blood. Rhett spurred Tucker forward, and the horse responded immediately, pushing through the drifts. Ma'am, hold on!" The woman didn't seem to hear him. She kept moving, one foot in front of the other, her arms wrapped around something she held against her chest. Her hair, gray and wild, whipped around her face. Her lips were blue. She was dying. Right here, right now, she was dying in front of him. Rhett dismounted before Tucker had fully stopped, his boots sinking deep into the snow. He reached the woman in 3 strides and caught her just as her legs gave out. "I've got you," he said, taking her weight. She was light, too light, and so cold it scared him. "I've got you. You're okay now." Her eyes opened. They were pale blue, intelligent despite the cold and exhaustion. She looked at him, and for a moment she seemed to see him, really see him. Then her gaze drifted past him, searching the white emptiness behind. "He's coming," she whispered. Her voice was raw, barely audible over the wind. "He'll find me. He always finds me." "Nobody's finding anybody in this weather," Rhett said firmly. He needed to get her warm, needed to get her moving. "Can you stand? Can you ride?" She shook her head, but not in answer, in despair. "The children, the records, I have to—" She clutched whatever she was holding tighter. A leather satchel, Rhett saw now, old and battered, held closed with a strap. "You have to get warm," Rhett interrupted. "Everything else comes second. Understood?" He didn't wait for an answer. He lifted her. She weighed nothing, nothing at all, and carried her to Tucker. The horse stood steady, bless him, as Rhett maneuvered the woman into the saddle. She slumped forward immediately, and Rhett had to mount behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her upright. Hold on to that satchel if it's important, he told her. Hold on to the saddle horn. Hold on to anything. Just don't let go. Her fingers, white and trembling, gripped the horn. Rhett turned Tucker toward home and gave the horse his head. Tucker knew the way, even when Rhett couldn't see 5 feet in front of his face. The wind pushed at them, tried to shove them off course, but the buckskin plowed forward with the determination of an animal heading toward warmth and feed. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Rhett felt it in the way her weight shifted against him, the way her head would loll and then jerk upright again. "Stay with me," he said into her ear. "We're almost there. Stay with me." "He killed her," the woman mumbled. "My daughter. My beautiful girl. He killed her and took the baby, and I couldn't stop him. I couldn't—" "Save your strength," Rhett said, but his gut had gone cold. This woman wasn't just lost. She was running, and whatever she was running from had hurt her badly. The ranch house appeared out of the storm like a miracle, a solid shape, lamplight glowing warm in the windows. Rhett felt his shoulders drop with relief. He guided Tucker right up to the porch, dismounted, and pulled the woman down after him. The front door banged open, and Mara stood there, her dark hair wild around her face. She was 16, tall and lean, with her mother's sharp cheekbones and her father's stubborn jaw. "Pa!" Her eyes went wide. "What? Who is that?" "Get blankets," Rhett ordered, half carrying the woman toward the door. "Hot water, coffee if we have it. Move." Mara disappeared into the house. Behind her, 2 smaller faces appeared, Eli, 12, with serious brown eyes, and Josie, 7, clutching a rag doll to her chest. "Who's that, Pa?" Josie asked, her voice small. "Someone who needs help," Rhett said. He got the woman through the door and into the main room, where the fire burned in the hearth. He lowered her into the chair nearest the flames. "Eli, go take care of Tucker. Rub him down good and give him extra feed. He earned it tonight." Eli nodded and slipped out the door without a word. The boy had been quiet since Sarah died, quieter than he'd been before anyway. He lived in his head now, in books and drawings and thoughts he didn't share. Mara reappeared with an armload of quilts, her face pale but determined. She'd learned to be the woman of the house too young, and she wore the responsibility like armor. "Here, Pa." Together they wrapped the woman in layers, tucking the blankets around her. Her dress was torn, Rhett saw now, ripped at the shoulder and along one side. The blood on it had dried dark. There was a gash on her forehead, another on her arm. Scrapes and bruises covered her hands. She'd fought someone, or something. The woman's eyes fluttered open again, and she looked around the room with confusion, slowly giving way to awareness. Her gaze landed on Josie, who stood at a careful distance, her doll held tight. "Hello, little one," the woman said softly. Her voice was hoarse but gentler now, warmer. "Don't be afraid." Josie didn't move closer, but she didn't run either. "Are you hurt?" "A bit," the woman admitted. "But I'll be all right now." "What's your name?" Mara asked. Her tone was cautious, protective. She stood between the stranger and her younger siblings like a shield. The woman hesitated. Rhett saw the calculation in her eyes. How much to say, how much to hide. Finally she answered, "Lillian, Dr. Lillian Ward." "You're a doctor?" Mara's eyebrows went up. "I was." Lillian's smile was sad. "A long time ago." Rhett knelt beside the chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Dr. Ward, you're safe here. But I need to know. Is someone following you? Should I be watching for trouble?" Lillian's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked ancient, broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring danger to anyone else. I had nowhere else to go." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes, and in them Rhett saw fear so deep it had worn grooves into her soul. "Yes," she whispered, "someone's following me, and when he finds me, he'll kill me. Or worse." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Josie moved closer to Mara, who put a protective arm around her. "Then he won't find you," Rhett said quietly. "Not tonight, not in this storm, and by the time the weather clears, we'll figure out what to do." "You don't understand. I understand you're half frozen and bleeding in my house," Rhett interrupted. "Everything else can wait until you're warm and fed and rested. Mara, get some stew heating. Josie, find some clean clothes, doctor. Ward can change into something of your mother's should fit. Josie's eyes went very round at the mention of her mother, but she nodded and scurried toward the back bedrooms. Mara headed for the kitchen, shooting one more uncertain look at the stranger before disappearing. Lillian clutched the leather satchel tighter. You're very kind. Too kind. You should turn me out. Send me back into the storm. It would be safer for you. Not happening, Rhett said flatly. He stood and added another log to the fire. You can barely stand. You'd be dead within an hour. Better me than your children. Rhett turned to look at her, really look at her. Past the blood and exhaustion, past the fear, he saw strength. Whoever this woman was, whatever had happened to her, she'd survived it. She was still fighting. My children have already lost one person they loved, he said quietly. I won't teach them to turn away someone in need just because it's inconvenient or scary. That's not the lesson I want them to learn. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. You're a good man, Mr. Dawson. Rhett Dawson. He pulled a stool over and sat down, his knees protesting. And I'm a practical man. You're here, you need help, and I'm not throwing you out. But when you're ready, I'll need the truth. All of it. You'll regret that. Maybe. Rhett shrugged. Won't be the first time I've regretted something. Won't be the last. Eli slipped back in through the front door, bringing a gust of cold air with him. Snow had piled up in his hair and on his shoulders. Tucker's settled, Pa. I gave him a double portion like you said. Good boy. Rhett nodded toward the bedroom hallway. Go get yourself dried off and warm. Tell Josie I want her back out here in 5 minutes. Eli nodded and disappeared. He'd glanced at Lillian only once, a quick, assessing look that reminded Rhett painfully of Sarah. Eli had his mother's eyes, thoughtful and deep, always watching, always measuring. Mara emerged from the kitchen carrying a bowl of stew and a piece of bread. The stew was yesterday's, venison and potatoes and carrots, but it smelled good, and Rhett heard Lillian's stomach growl. Here, Mara said, offering the bowl. It's not much, but it's hot. Lillian took it with shaking hands. Thank you. Truly. She ate slowly at first, then faster, as if remembering how hungry she was. Mara stood watching her, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Rhett recognized that look. It was the one Mara wore when she was trying to figure something out, when she was putting pieces together. How long have you been out there? Mara asked. In the storm? I don't know. Lillian paused between bites. Hours. Since morning, maybe. I lost track. Where did you come from? Mara, Rhett said warningly. It's all right, Lillian said. She set the bowl down, most of the stew gone. I came from the east, from a town called Clearwater, about 30 miles from here. She hesitated. I was staying there, hiding there, but they found me. Who found you? Mara pressed. The people I ran from. Lillian's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The people who destroyed my life. Josie reappeared then, carrying a bundle of clothes. A simple dress, a shawl, thick stockings. She approached Lillian slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal. These were Mama's, she said softly. Pa said you could wear them. Lillian reached out and touched the fabric gently, reverently. Your mother must have been a wonderful woman. She was. Josie's voice was fierce despite its smallness. She made the best apple pie in all of Montana, and she could ride a horse faster than anybody, and she read to us every night before bed, even when she was tired. She sounds extraordinary. She was. Tears brightened Josie's eyes. And then she got sick, and she died, and now it's just us and Pa, and everything's wrong. Josie, Rhett started, but Josie wasn't finished. Are you going to die too? She demanded, looking at Lillian with a child's devastating directness. Because I don't want anybody else to die. Lillian's face softened. She set the clothes aside and held out her hand. After a moment, Josie took it. Her small fingers disappeared into Lillian's larger scarred ones. I'm not planning on dying, Lillian said gently. In fact, your father just saved my life. So I think I'm going to be around for a while if that's all right with you. Will you be our grandmother? Josie asked suddenly. We don't have one. Both of them died before I was born. Rhett opened his mouth to tell Josie that was too forward, too much, but Lillian spoke first. "I suppose I will," she said, and her voice trembled on the words. "If you'll have me." Josie threw her arms around Lillian's neck, and Lillian held her, carefully, because of her injuries, but tightly all the same. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. Mara made a small sound and turned away, but not before Rhett saw her wipe at her eyes. Eli had come back out and stood in the hallway, watching silently. "All right," Rhett said, his own voice rougher than he intended. "That's enough excitement for one night. Dr. Ward needs rest. Josie, show her to the spare room. Mara, help her get changed and look at those wounds. Eli, I'll check the doors and windows," Eli said quietly. "Make sure everything's locked up tight." Rhett nodded. "Good thinking." As the children moved to help Lillian as the house shifted into the rhythms of bedtime and settling, Rhett walked to the front window and looked out into the storm. The wind had picked up even more, if that was possible. Snow had drifted halfway up the porch railing. Nothing could move in this. Nothing human, anyway. But come morning, when the storm cleared, Rhett's hand rested on the window frame, and he thought about the fear in Lillian's eyes, about the blood on her dress, about the way she'd clutched that leather satchel like it contained something more precious than gold. He thought about his children, about the laughter that had slowly been returning to this house, about Mara's walls and Eli's silence and Josie's desperate need for someone to fill the hole Sarah had left. And he thought about the vow he'd made when Sarah died, that he would protect their children, no matter what, that he would keep them safe. He'd brought a stranger into his home, a woman running from something that terrified her, a woman with secrets. Rhett just hoped to God those secrets didn't get his family killed. The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed pushed against one wall and a dresser that had been Sarah's before they married. A window looked out onto the side yard, currently just a rectangle of white chaos. Mara helped Lillian out of her ruined dress and into Sarah's old clothes, her touch efficient but not unkind. "These cuts need cleaning," Mara said, examining the gash on Lillian's forehead. "I'll get the medical kit." "You know how to tend wounds?" Lillian asked. "Ma taught me before she got too sick." Mara's jaw was tight. Said every woman on a ranch needs to know doctoring, since the nearest real doctor is 20 miles away and the weather doesn't care if you're bleeding. She left and returned with a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and a wooden box filled with bandages, salves, and surgical thread. Lillian watched as Mara worked with steady, practiced hands, cleaning the wounds, applying pressure to stop the bleeding that had started again. "You're good at this," Lillian observed. "I have to be." Mara didn't look up from her work. "Pa needs me to be." "That's a heavy burden for someone your age." "I'm 16. Ma was married at 17. Mara's tone dared Lillian to contradict her. "I can handle it." "I'm sure you can." Lillian winced as Mara cleaned the deeper cut on her arm. "But that doesn't mean you should have to." Mara's hands paused. She looked at Lillian directly for the first time, and there was something raw in her expression. "What do you know about it? You don't know us. You don't know what we've been through." "You're right," Lillian agreed quietly. "I don't, but I know what it's like to lose someone you love, to have your world torn apart, to feel like you have to be strong for everyone else even when you're breaking inside." Mara's eyes shone with sudden tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. Don't act like you understand. I'm not acting. You're a stranger. You'll be gone as soon as the storm clears." Mara went back to bandaging, her movements rougher now. "So don't pretend you care. Don't pretend you're going to stay and be part of this family. Josie already lost one mother. I won't let her get attached to someone who's just going to leave." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and hurting. "You're protecting her," Lillian said softly. "That's what big sisters do." "I'm protecting all of them." Mara tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "Eli's too quiet, and Josie's too sad, and Pa's too—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Pa's drowning and pretending he's swimming. So yeah, I protect them. That's my job now." "And who protects you?" Mara's hands went still. For a moment she looked impossibly young, just a girl playing at being grown. Then her face hardened again. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting sometimes. Well, I don't. Mara stood abruptly, gathering the medical supplies. You're all bandaged. Try to get some rest. Pa will want to talk to you in the morning. She was at the door when Lillian spoke again. Mara? The girl paused but didn't turn around. Thank you, Lillian said, for helping me, for letting me stay, even though you don't trust me. That takes courage. Mara's shoulders tensed. Don't thank me yet. You haven't told us what you're running from. Maybe when you do, we'll throw you out anyway. She left, closing the door behind her with careful control. Lillian heard her footsteps retreat down the hall, heard the murmur of voices. Rhett asking if everything was all right, Mara answering in tones too low to make out. Alone, Lillian let herself shake. She pulled the quilts up around her shoulders and hugged the leather satchel to her chest. Inside were papers that could destroy lives, evidence of crimes that had ruined families, names of children stolen from their mothers, sold to the highest bidders. And somewhere out in the storm, or waiting for the storm to clear, was the man who would kill her to keep those secrets buried. Gideon Blackstone, her daughter's husband, her granddaughter's father, the monster who wore a gentleman's face. Lillian closed her eyes and saw Catherine's face. Beautiful Catherine with her father's medical mind and her mother's gentle heart. Catherine who had fallen in love with a charming doctor from back east, who had married him despite Lillian's unease, who had given birth to a perfect baby girl. Catherine who had discovered what her husband really was. Catherine who had confronted him. Catherine who had died 3 days later. Her death ruled an accident by doctors on Gideon's payroll. And baby Emma, sweet Emma, with Catherine's dark hair and Lillian's blue eyes, had vanished into Gideon's network, sold to some wealthy couple who wanted a child and didn't ask questions. Gone as if she'd never existed. Lillian had tried to expose him. She'd gone to the police, to the newspapers, to anyone who would listen. But Gideon had money and influence and friends in high places. Within a month, Lillian had been declared mentally unstable, a danger to herself and others, a grief-stricken mother inventing conspiracy theories because she couldn't accept her daughter's accidental death. They'd tried to commit her to an asylum. She'd run instead. For 3 years she'd been running, staying nowhere long enough to be found. Working as a nurse, a housekeeper, a seamstress, any job that would take her without asking too many questions. Moving from town to town, always looking over her shoulder. And then, finally, she'd found them. Gideon's records, his ledgers, names and dates and payments that proved everything. She'd broken into his office in Clearwater, where he'd set up a new practice, a new respectable front. She'd stolen the evidence that would hang him, and she'd been caught leaving. Lillian touched her ribs gingerly. Gideon's men had beaten her, had tried to take the satchel, but she'd fought like a wild thing, had broken away, had run into the storm with the documents clutched to her chest. They would come for her. As soon as the weather allowed, they would come. And this family, this kind, grieving family that had taken her in, would be caught in the crossfire. Lillian pressed her face into the pillow and let herself cry silently, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back since Catherine died. She cried for her daughter, for her lost granddaughter, for the life she'd had before Gideon destroyed everything. And she cried because she knew, with terrible certainty, that she'd brought death to the Dawson family's door. Morning came gray and bitter. The storm had blown itself out sometime before dawn, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay in drifts taller than a man in some places, sculpted by the wind into strange, beautiful shapes. The sky was the color of old iron, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Rhett was up before sunrise, as always. He dressed in the dark, not wanting to wake the children, and made his way to the kitchen. The fire had burned low during the night, and he built it back up, adding logs until heat began to fill the room again. He was putting coffee on when he heard footsteps behind him. "I hope I'm not intruding." He turned to find Lillian in the doorway, dressed in Sarah's old blue dress, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. The bandages on her face and arm stood out starkly against her pale skin, but her eyes were clear and steady. "You should be resting," Rhett said. "I've rested enough." Lillian moved into the kitchen with the careful movements of someone in pain. "And I owe you a conversation. The truth. I believe you said." Rhett gestured to the table. Coffee first. Truth can wait until we're both human. They sat in silence while the coffee brewed, while the house slowly woke around them. Rhett heard Eli's door open, the boys' quiet footsteps heading toward the barn to start morning chores, heard Josie's lighter steps, then Mara's voice telling her to get dressed before coming out. Normal sounds, family sounds. Rhett poured 2 cups of coffee and pushed one across the table to Lillian. She wrapped her hands around it gratefully, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. My daughter's name was Catherine, Lillian began without preamble. She was a physician, like me. Smart, compassionate, dedicated to helping people. She met a doctor named Gideon Blackstone at a medical conference in Boston. He swept her off her feet. Rhett sipped his coffee and listened. They married within 6 months. Lillian's voice caught. I had concerns. Something about him felt wrong, but Catherine was so happy, and I thought I was just being an overprotective mother, so I kept my concerns to myself. What kind of concerns? Nothing concrete, just a feeling that his charm was too practiced, his stories too perfect. The way his eyes went cold when he thought no one was watching. Lillian's hands tightened on the cup. I should have said something, should have pushed harder. Hindsight's a cruel thing, Rhett said quietly. Yes. Lillian stared into her coffee. They moved to Denver, where Gideon had opened a practice. Catherine became pregnant almost immediately. When she wrote to tell me about the baby, she sounded so happy. And then she stopped, took a shaky breath. And then? Rhett prompted gently. And then the letters changed. Catherine started saying strange things, that Gideon was spending long hours away from home, that she'd found papers in his study she didn't understand, that young women kept coming to his practice, desperate girls with nowhere to turn. Lillian looked up, met Rhett's eyes. She was a physician. She knew what an illegal adoption ring looked like. Rhett's jaw tightened. He was selling babies, stealing them, buying them from desperate mothers, coercing girls who had nowhere else to go, then selling them to wealthy couples for thousands of dollars. Lillian's voice was flat now, reciting facts to keep the emotion at bay. Catherine confronted him. She threatened to go to the authorities, and 3 days later she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Christ. The doctors, Gideon's friends, ruled it an accident, a tragic fall. Everyone was very sympathetic. Lillian's smile was bitter. And the baby? Little Emma? She disappeared from the hospital nursery the same night Catherine died. When I arrived in Denver, Gideon told me Catherine had given Emma up before she died, decided she couldn't raise a child alone. He had papers, documents, all very official. But you didn't believe him. I'm not an idiot, Mr. Dawson. My daughter didn't fall. And she didn't give up her baby. Lillian set her cup down with controlled force. So I started investigating. I found girls who'd been through Gideon's practice, couples who'd paid him for babies. I gathered evidence, names, dates, and I went to the police. Let me guess. They didn't believe you. Worse. Gideon had me declared mentally incompetent, a grief-stricken mother suffering delusions, he said. He had me committed to an asylum. Lillian's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you know what they do to women in asylums, Mr. Dawson? Rhett's hand curled into a fist on the table. I can imagine. I escaped after 3 months. I've been running ever since, trying to stay ahead of Gideon's men, trying to find proof that would be strong enough to stand against his money and influence. Lillian reached down and pulled the leather satchel onto the table. And I finally found it. She opened the satchel and pulled out a ledger, old, leather-bound, its pages covered in neat handwriting, names, dates, amounts of money, a catalog of crimes. This is Gideon's record book from his practice in Clearwater, Lillian said. It lists every baby he's sold in the past 2 years, every payment, every contact. It names names, Mr. Dawson, prominent names, wealthy names, people who would do anything to keep this secret buried. Rhett stared at the ledger. You stole this from him. 2 nights ago, I broke into his office after dark. I thought I was careful, but someone saw me leaving. They chased me, beat me, tried to take it back. She touched the bandage on her forehead. I ran, made it to the edge of town and stole a horse, rode until the storm hit and the horse threw me. After that, she shrugged. I walked until you found me. And Gideon, where is he now? Looking for me. His men are looking for me, and they won't stop until they find me and this ledger. Lillian met his eyes. I told you last night you should have left me in the storm. I meant it, because when they come, and they will come, anyone associated with me will be in danger. What about the law? Can't you take this to a sheriff, to a federal marshal? Gideon owns half the law enforcement between here and Denver. The ones he doesn't own, he's blackmailed or threatened. Lillian's laugh was hollow. I did finally find one honest judge, Judge Whitaker in Helena. But he's 300 miles from here, and I'd never make it that far before Gideon's men caught me. Rhett sat back in his chair, processing. Outside, he could hear Eli talking to the horses, could hear the soft sounds of the animals stirring. Inside, his children were waking up to another day, a day that had just become a lot more complicated. So what's your plan? He asked. I don't have one anymore. Lillian's shoulders sagged. I thought I could get to Helena, get to Judge Whitaker, end this. But I can't do it alone. And I won't drag you and your children into my fight. Seems like you already did. Then let me leave. As soon as the roads are passable, I'll go. Head north, draw Gideon's attention away from here. You and your family will be safe. And you'll be dead within a week. Probably. Lillian said it calmly, like she'd already accepted it. But better me than your children. They sat in silence. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the sun was rising, turning the snow from gray to white to blazing gold. Rhett thought about his children, about Mara's fierce protectiveness and Eli's quiet strength, and Josie's desperate need for family. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made her before she died, that he'd always choose what was right, even when it was hard. And he thought about the woman sitting across from him, beaten and exhausted and still fighting, still trying to protect children she'd never met from a monster who wore a gentleman's face. No, Rhett said. Lillian blinked. No? No, you're not leaving. Not until we figure this out properly. Rhett stood, walked to the window, looked out at his ranch, his land, his home, his responsibility. You came here for a reason. Maybe it was luck, maybe it was fate, maybe it was just the storm pushing you in this direction, but you're here now, and I don't turn away people who need help. Mr. Dawson, Rhett. Lillian stood too, wincing at the movement. You're not thinking clearly. You have children to protect. A life here. I'm not worth risking all of that. That's not your decision to make. It absolutely is. This is my fight, my burden. And those babies in that ledger? Rhett turned to face her. That your granddaughter out there somewhere, sold to the highest bidder? That you're fight alone too? Lillian's face crumpled. That's not fair. No, it's not. None of this is fair, but it's real, and it's happening, and right now you're the only person with evidence that can stop this bastard. Rhett moved closer, his voice intense. So, here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay here, safe, while I ride into town and talk to Sheriff Collins. He's a good man. You can't trust... I can trust him, Rhett interrupted firmly. Known him 20 years. He's honest, and he won't be bought. We tell him what's happening, show him the ledger, and we figure out how to get you to this Judge Whitaker safely. And if Gideon's men come here first, then they'll find out that Montana ranchers don't take kindly to threats. Rhett's smile had no humor in it. I've got rifles, I've got ammunition, and I've got neighbors who'll come running if I fire 3 shots in quick succession. We're not as helpless as you think. Lillian studied him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Because it's right, Rhett said simply. Because those babies deserve justice, and your daughter deserves justice, and you deserve justice, and because... He paused, the words harder than he expected. Because my kids lost their mother, and they're learning to live with that grief. But if I teach them to turn away from someone in need just because it's dangerous or inconvenient, then I've failed them worse than losing Sarah ever could. Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks. You're a remarkable man, Rhett Dawson. I'm a stubborn fool, more like. But his voice was gentle. Now, I'm going to go talk to the kids. They need to know what's happening, at least the basics. Then I'm riding to town. You're going to stay here and rest and maybe eat something. Mara will be in charge while I'm gone. Rhett and Lillian? He stopped at the kitchen door, looked back. Welcome to the family, such as it is. He left her standing there, tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her mouth. The conversation with the children went about as well as Rhett expected, which was to say, it didn't go well at all. They gathered in the main room, around the fire. Eli sat on the floor, his back against the wall, watchful and quiet. Josie curled up in the big chair, her doll clutched tight. Mara stood, arms crossed, her expression already suspicious. Dr. Ward is going to be staying with us for a while, Rhett began. How long? Mara demanded. I don't know yet. Until it's safe for her to leave. Safe from what? Eli spoke up, his voice soft but clear. What's she running from, Pa? Rhett had debated how much to tell them. They were children. Josie especially was just a baby still. But they were also frontier children, ranch children. They'd seen birth and death and hardship. They deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as they could handle. Dr. Ward's daughter died, Rhett said carefully. The man who killed her is looking for Dr. Ward now. He's dangerous, and he has people working for him. They might come here. Mara's face went white. You brought a murderer's attention to our house? I brought a woman who needed help into our house, Rhett corrected. And yes, that means we might be in some danger, which is why I need you all to listen carefully. He laid out the rules. No going outside alone, no wandering away from the house, rifles loaded and ready but out of Josie's reach. If strangers came asking questions, the children were to act normal but say nothing about Lillian. If anything felt wrong, they were to get inside and bar the door and fire 3 warning shots. This is insane, Mara said when he finished. Pa, we can't. We already did, Rhett said quietly. I made the choice when I brought her here, but I'm telling you now, if you really can't accept this, if you're truly afraid, I'll make other arrangements. I'll send you to stay with the Hendersons until this is over. Absolutely not, Mara said immediately. We're not leaving you. Me neither, Eli added. I want to stay with Grandma Lillian, Josie announced, and the fact that she'd already given Lillian that title made Rhett's chest tight. Then we stay together, Rhett said. We watch out for each other, we keep Dr. Ward safe, and we trust that the law will do the right thing. And if it doesn't? Mara asked. Rhett met her eyes steadily. Then we handle it ourselves. The ride into town took 3 hours through snow-choked roads. Rhett pushed Tucker hard, knowing every minute counted. If Gideon's men were already in town, if they'd already started asking questions, he couldn't think about that. The town of Whitefish wasn't much, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a sheriff's office. A handful of houses scattered around, maybe 150 people total, most of them ranchers or miners or folks just trying to survive Montana winters. Rhett tied Tucker outside the sheriff's office and pushed through the door. Sheriff Tom Collins looked up from his desk, his weathered face breaking into a smile. Rhett, hell of a storm we had. Everything all right at your place? We need to talk, Tom, privately. The smile faded. Collins was 50, gray-haired and solid, with eyes that missed nothing. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, and in all that time Rhett had never known him to be anything but honest. Come on back, Collins said, gesturing to a back room. Rhett followed him into a small office and closed the door. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Tom, I need to know if any strangers have come through town in the last few days. Well-dressed men, probably from back east, asking questions about an older woman. Collins's expression sharpened. Why? Because I found that woman half dead in the snow 2 days ago, and the men looking for her are dangerous. Jesus, Rhett, what have you gotten yourself into? The right thing, I hope. Rhett leaned against the desk. But I need to know if they've been here, if they're coming. Collins was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. There was a man. Came through yesterday afternoon, just as the storm was starting to ease. Well-dressed, like you said, had a fancy carriage and a driver. Asked at the general store if anyone had seen an elderly woman, said there was a family inheritance dispute and he was her lawyer. Rhett's gut clenched. What did you tell him? Nothing, because I wasn't there. But Martha at the store said she hadn't seen anyone like that. Collins frowned. The man didn't push it, just thanked her politely and left. But Rhett, there was something off about him. Martha said he smiled too much, said it didn't reach his eyes. That sounds like one of Gideon's men. Gideon? And so Rhett told him about Lillian, about Catherine, about the babies and the ledger and the 3 years of running. Collins listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. When Rhett finished, Collins let out a long, low whistle. That's one hell of a story. You believe me? I believe you believe it. And I believe that woman's terrified. Collins rubbed his jaw. But Rhett, these are serious accusations. If this Gideon Blackstone is as connected as you say, he is, then we need to be damn careful how we handle this. We need proof. We need evidence. And we need to get this to someone with jurisdiction over crimes that cross territory lines. Lillian says there's a Judge Whitaker in Helena who's honest. Isaiah Whitaker? Collins' eyebrows went up. He's got a reputation, tough as nails, fair as they come, and he's made enemies going after corruption. If he's willing to take this case, it'll stick. Can you get a message to him? I can try. Telegraph might be down from the storm, but I'll send a rider if I have to. Collins stood, paced to the window. In the meantime, you need to keep that woman safe, and yourself, and your kids. These men, if they're willing to kill for this secret, I know. Do you? Because, Rhett, I've known you a long time. You're a good man, a strong man, but you're one man against God knows how many, and you've got 3 children to worry about. I can handle it. That's what concerns me. Collins turned to face him. Your pride. It's not pride. It's absolutely pride. Sarah's death broke something in you, and you've been trying to prove you can handle everything on your own ever since. Collins's voice was gentle but firm. But you can't. Not this. So let me help. I'll get word to Whitaker. I'll keep my eyes open for these men, and I'll make sure your neighbors know to watch out for trouble. Rhett wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could manage, but Collins was right. This was bigger than him, bigger than his ranch, bigger than his pride. All right, he said finally. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We don't know how this ends. Collins clapped him on the shoulder. Get home to your kids. Keep your guns loaded and your eyes open. I'll send word as soon as I hear from Helena. Rhett rode home through the afternoon cold, his mind churning. They had a plan now, or at least the beginning of one. Get word to Judge Whitaker, get Lillian to Helena safely, let the law handle the rest. It sounded simple. It wouldn't be. Because Rhett had seen the fear in Lillian's eyes, had heard the certainty in her voice when she said Gideon would come for her. Men like Gideon, men with money and power and no conscience, didn't let witnesses walk away, didn't let evidence reach honest judges. They eliminated problems, and right now, Lillian Ward was a problem. The sun was setting when Rhett finally saw his ranch house ahead, lamplight glowing warm in the windows. He felt his shoulders drop with relief. Still standing, still safe. For now. He unsaddled Tucker, rubbed him down, fed him. The simple, familiar work of caring for his horse settled something in Rhett's chest. This was his life. Ranch work, family, simple routines. He was good at this. Fighting murderers and conspiracies? That was something else entirely. Rhett was halfway to the house when he saw the tracks. Fresh tracks in the snow, leading up to the porch and then away again. Not animal tracks, boot prints. Someone had been here while he was gone. His heart hammering, Rhett ran for the house and burst through the door. Mara, Eli, Josie! Pa? Mara appeared from the kitchen, her face pale but composed. What's wrong? Someone was here. I saw tracks. The peddler, Eli said, emerging from the back hall. He came through selling supplies. Mara sent him away. Rhett sagged against the doorframe. Just a peddler. Yes. But Mara's expression was troubled, though he asked questions about you, about the storm, about whether we'd seen anyone unusual lately. What did you tell him? Nothing, just that we were fine and didn't need anything. Mara hesitated. But Pa, he didn't look like any peddler I've ever seen. His clothes were too nice. His hands were too clean. Ice formed in Rhett's stomach. Where's Dr. Ward? In her room, resting. Eli's voice was steady, but his eyes were worried. She heard the peddler and hid in the cellar, just like you told us. We didn't let on she was here. Good, good. Rhett straightened, forced himself to calm down. You two did exactly right. I'm proud of you. But as night fell and the family gathered for supper, as Josie chattered about the book Lillian had read to her and Eli showed his father a drawing he'd done, Rhett felt the weight of watching eyes. They were being observed, evaluated. And somewhere out in the Montana darkness, Gideon Blackstone's men were planning their next move. The storm had passed. The real danger was just beginning. The days that followed moved with the slow, tense rhythm of a drawn bowstring. Everyone in the Dawson house felt it. The waiting, the watching, the certainty that something was coming but not knowing when or how it would arrive. Lillian kept to herself mostly, moving through the house like a ghost trying not to disturb the living. She helped where she could, mending clothes, preparing meals, organizing the pantry with the efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime making order from chaos. But her hands shook when she worked, and Rhett noticed how she'd pause sometimes, mid-task, and stare out the window at the empty white expanse beyond, her face drawn with fear. You don't have to hide in your room, Rhett told her one morning, finding her hovering in the hallway like she wasn't sure she had permission to exist in the common spaces. I don't want to be a burden, she replied softly. You're not a burden. You're family. He said it firmly, the way he said everything, and watched color rise in her pale cheeks. Your daughter doesn't think so. Rhett glanced toward the kitchen, where Mara was aggressively kneading bread dough, her movements sharp and angry. Mara's protecting her heart. She's scared of losing someone else. Give her time. I may not have time to give. The words hung between them, heavy with truth neither wanted to acknowledge. Josie at least had no such reservations. She'd attached herself to Lillian with the desperate intensity of a child starving for maternal affection. She followed the older woman everywhere, chattering constantly, asking questions, begging for stories. And Lillian, despite her fear and exhaustion, softened around the little girl in ways that made Rhett's chest ache. He found them together one afternoon in the main room, Josie curled up against Lillian's side while the older woman read from a worn book of fairy tales. Lillian's voice was gentle as she read about princesses and dragons and happy endings that seemed impossibly far from their current reality. And they lived happily ever after, Lillian finished, closing the book. Do people really get happy endings? Josie asked, her voice small. Or is that just in stories? Lillian was quiet for a moment, one hand stroking Josie's dark hair. I think, she said carefully, that happy endings are real, but they don't always look the way we expect them to, and sometimes we have to fight very hard to reach them. Is that what you're doing, fighting for a happy ending? I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying very hard. Josie looked up at her with those enormous, trusting eyes. I think you'll get one, because you're good and brave, and in stories, good and brave people always win. I hope you're right, Lillian whispered, and Rhett saw tears shining on her cheeks before he quietly backed away, leaving them to their moment. Eli was harder to read, as always. He watched Lillian with careful attention but kept his distance, not unfriendly, but not warm either. Rhett caught him one evening in the barn, supposedly checking on the horses but really just standing in the dim light, his expression troubled. Something on your mind, son? Eli jumped slightly, then shrugged. Just thinking. About? About Dr. Ward. About the men looking for her. Eli's voice was quiet but steady. About what happens if they find her here. Rhett leaned against the stall door, choosing his words carefully. I won't lie to you, Eli. There's danger, but we're taking precautions. Sheriff Collins knows what's happening, and he's working on getting help. But what if help doesn't come in time? Eli looked at his father directly. What if those men come here and they have guns and they want to hurt Dr. Ward? What do we do then? We protect her. How? I'm 12, Pa. Mara's 16. Josie's just a baby. How are we supposed to... By being smart and careful and trusting that I'll keep you safe, Rhett interrupted, moving closer. Eli, I know you're worried. I know this is scary, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Eli was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, Pa, I trust you. But as Rhett walked back to the house, he felt the weight of that trust like a stone in his chest. His son believed in him, believed he could protect them all. Rhett just hoped to God he could live up to that faith. 3 days after the peddler's visit, Sheriff Collins rode up to the ranch just after dawn. Rhett saw him coming and met him at the door, his stomach tight with anticipation. You got word? Rhett asked before Collins could even dismount. I did. Collins swung down from his horse, his expression grim. Judge Whitaker received my message. He's willing to hear the case, but he needs Dr. Ward to come to Helena with the evidence. He can't act on hearsay alone. When? As soon as possible. The judge is leaving for Washington Territory in 2 weeks for a series of trials. If we don't get Dr. Ward to him before then, we'll have to wait months for another opportunity. Rhett's mind raced. Helena was 300 miles northwest, at least a week's journey in good conditions. With snow still heavy on the ground and potential assassins watching the roads, it could take twice that long. I'll need to arrange an escort, Collins continued. Maybe a couple of my deputies, some trusted men. No. Lillian's voice came from behind them, and both men turned to find her standing in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her face pale but determined. No deputies, no escorts. The more people involved, the more danger everyone's in. Ma'am, with all respect, you can't make that journey alone, Collins said. I'm not suggesting I go alone. Lillian looked at Rhett. I'm suggesting he takes me. Absolutely not, Rhett said immediately. I'm not leaving my children here unprotected. Then bring them with us. Have you lost your mind? That's even more dangerous. Is it? Lillian stepped out onto the porch, her voice rising. Is it more dangerous than staying here waiting for Gideon's men to come? Because they will come, Rhett. That peddler was scouting. They know I'm here, or they suspect it. It's only a matter of time before they make their move. All the more reason for me to stay and defend this place. And if they bring 10 men, 20? Lillian's eyes were fierce now, all trace of the frightened woman gone. You're one man with 3 children to protect. You can't fight an army. She has a point, Collins said reluctantly. If Blackstone's men come in force, your ranch house won't hold. Better to be moving, harder to pin down. Rhett wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could handle it, but the logic was sound. Staying made them sitting ducks. Moving at least gave them options. How would we even do this? He asked, his voice tight. The main roads will be watched. We go through the mountains, Lillian said. The old mining trails. They're harder, slower, but less obvious. In winter? Those trails are deadly even in good weather. I'll take deadly trails over certain ambush, Lillian's voice softened. Rhett, I know what I'm asking. I know it's dangerous, but staying here, waiting for them to come to us, that's not protecting your children. That's just choosing where they die. The words hit like a physical blow. Rhett turned to Collins. What do you think? Collins was quiet for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. I think she's right about the danger, and I think if you're going to run, you need to do it soon, before Blackstone's people have time to set up roadblocks and checkpoints. He paused. I can give you supplies, detailed maps of the mountain trails, maybe a couple of good horses from my stable. And I'll stay here, keep an eye on your ranch. Make sure no one burns it down while you're gone. That's asking a lot, Tom. That's what friends do. Collins met his eyes. Besides, if what Dr. Ward says is true, and we can bring Blackstone down, that's worth the risk. Rhett looked at Lillian, at the determination in her face, the desperate hope. Then he looked past her into the house, where he could hear his children moving around, starting their day, trusting him to keep them safe. We leave tomorrow at first light, he said finally. Pack light, dress warm. We'll take the North Trail through Cooper's Pass. That trail's been closed since the big avalanche 2 years ago, Collins said, which means no one will expect us to use it. Rhett's jaw was set. We'll make it work. Collins nodded slowly. I'll bring supplies this afternoon. And Rhett, watch your back. All of you. After Collins left, Rhett gathered his children to break the news. Mara's reaction was immediate and explosive. You want us to run away? To leave our home? Her voice cracked with fury and fear. Pa, this is insane. This is survival, Rhett shot back. Mara, I know you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm angry. We shouldn't have to run. We didn't do anything wrong. You're right. But the world isn't fair, and sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices. The right thing? Mara's laugh was bitter. The right thing was not bringing a stranger into our house in the first place. Mara! Rhett's voice was sharp and his daughter flinched. He immediately softened his tone. I know this is hard. I know you're trying to protect Eli and Josie, but we're past the point of pretending this will just go away. We leave tomorrow, or we stay and fight a battle we can't win. Mara's eyes filled with angry tears. I hate this. I hate all of it. I know, sweetheart. I do too. Eli, who'd been sitting silently through the argument, finally spoke up. How long will we be gone? A few weeks, maybe. Depends on the weather and the trails. And then we can come home? Rhett wanted to promise yes, wanted to assure his son that everything would go back to normal, but he couldn't lie. I hope so. That's the plan. Josie, sitting in the big chair with her doll, looked up with wide eyes. Is Grandma Lillian coming with us? Yes. Good. Josie's voice was firm, brooking no argument. Because she's family now, and families stay together. Out of the mouths of babes, Rhett thought. His 7-year-old daughter understood something his 16-year-old was still fighting. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation. Rhett went through his supplies, selecting what they'd need. Food that wouldn't spoil in the cold, extra blankets, ammunition, medical supplies. He checked and cleaned his rifles, loaded his pistol, made sure every weapon was in working order. Mara packed their clothes with tight-lipped efficiency, her anger manifesting in sharp movements and slammed drawers. Eli helped his father with the outdoor preparations, checking the horses, organizing gear, working with the quiet intensity he brought to everything. Lillian stayed in her room most of the day, but when Rhett checked on her that evening, he found her at the small desk, writing. The leather satchel sat beside her, and she was carefully copying information from the ledger onto separate sheets of paper. What are you doing? He asked. She looked up, her eyes tired. Making copies. If something happens to the original ledger, if Gideon's men catch us and destroy it, at least there will be other records, other proof. That's smart. That's desperate. Lillian set down her pen, flexed her fingers. But desperation has kept me alive this long. I've learned to trust it. Rhett pulled up a chair, sat down beside her. The room was small, intimate, lit only by a single lamp. Outside, night had fallen, and the temperature was dropping fast. Tell me about your granddaughter, he said quietly. Emma. Lillian's hand stilled. Why? Because we're about to risk everything for her, for all the children in that ledger. I want to know who we're fighting for. Lillian was quiet for so long Rhett thought she might not answer. Then she reached into the satchel and pulled out a small photograph, faded and creased from being carried and handled. This was taken 2 weeks before Catherine died, she said, handing it to him. Rhett studied the photograph. It showed a young woman, beautiful, dark-haired, smiling, holding a tiny bundle. The baby's face was barely visible, just a hint of features beneath a white bonnet. Emma would be 3 years old now, Lillian said softly. She'd be talking, running, getting into everything. She'd have Catherine's laugh. Catherine had this wonderful, infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. And she'd probably have my stubbornness. A sad smile touched her lips. Catherine used to say I was the most stubborn woman in Colorado. I hope Emma inherited that. I hope it keeps her safe wherever she is. We'll find her, Rhett said. Once we get to Judge Whitaker, once we expose Gideon's operation, we'll find all those children and bring them home. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise to try. He handed the photograph back. And sometimes that's all we can do. Lillian clutched the photograph to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. For everything. For not turning me away, for believing me, for risking your family. We're not done yet, Rhett interrupted gently. Save your thanks for when we make it to Helena. That night, Rhett couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, the bed he'd shared with Sarah where they'd talked and laughed and planned their future, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, they'd leave this house, this life. for an uncertain journey through dangerous mountains with killers on their trail. It was madness. It was necessary. He heard footsteps in the hall, soft and uncertain. A moment later, there was a gentle knock on his door. "Come in," he called. The door opened and Josie slipped inside, her doll tucked under one arm. She was wearing her nightgown, her feet bare, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "Pa? I can't sleep." Rhett sat up, held out his arms. Josie ran to him and climbed into the bed, curling up against his side like she used to when she was smaller. "Scared?" he asked, stroking her hair. "A little." Her voice was muffled against his chest. "Are bad men really coming for Grandma Lillian?" Rhett considered lying, protecting her innocence a little longer, but Josie deserved the truth. "Yes, they are." "Will you stop them?" "I'm going to try." "You'll keep us safe?" "Always. That's my job." He kissed the top of her head. "But Josie, I need you to be brave tomorrow. Can you do that? Can you be strong for me?" She nodded against him. "I'll be brave, like Mama was when she was sick." The words pierced Rhett's heart. Sarah had been brave, unbelievably, impossibly brave, as the illness consumed her. She'd smiled through the pain, had made jokes, had held her children close and told them stories, even when she could barely breathe. "Yeah," he said roughly. Just like that. They lay together in the darkness, father and daughter, until Josie's breathing evened out and she fell asleep. Rhett held her, memorizing the weight of her in his arms, the smell of her hair, the trust in every line of her small body. Whatever happened in the days ahead, whatever dangers they faced, he would protect her. He would protect all of them, even if it killed him. Dawn came gray and cold. Rhett was up before the sun, moving through the house by lamplight, checking supplies one last time. Collins had been true to his word. He'd brought extra horses, detailed maps, enough food for a month if they were careful. The children dressed in layers, woolen clothes, and heavy coats. Mara was silent, her face set in hard lines. Eli moved with nervous energy, checking and rechecking his pack. Josie stayed close to Lillian, holding her hand. "Remember," Collins said as they prepared to mount up, "follow the north trail to Cooper's Pass. There's an old mining cabin about 3 days in. Should be stocked with some basics if you need to shelter. After that, you'll hit the high country. Navigation gets tricky there, so watch the markers." "What kind of markers?" Rhett asked. "Stacked stones, mostly. The miners used them to find their way in storms. Follow them west and slightly north, and you'll eventually hit the Helena Road." Collins handed Rhett a compass. "This was my father's. Bring it back when you're done." Rhett took it carefully. "Thank you, Tom, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Just make it to Helena alive." Collins looked at each of them in turn. Rhett, Lillian, the 3 children. "Stay together, stay alert, and trust your instincts. Something feels wrong, it probably is." They mounted up just as the sun was breaking over the horizon, painting the snow gold and pink. Rhett looked back at his ranch house one last time, at the home he'd built with Sarah, where they'd raised their children, where he'd planned to grow old. "We'll be back," Mara said fiercely beside him, and he realized she was looking at the house too. "This is our home. We'll be back." "Yes," Rhett agreed. "We will." They rode north, away from the rising sun, toward the mountains that loomed dark and dangerous on the horizon. The snow was deep but not impassable, and the horses moved steadily, their breath steaming in the cold air. For the first few hours, they saw no one. The landscape was empty, pristine, beautiful in its desolation. Just white snow and dark pines and the endless Montana sky. But around midday, Eli called out from where he'd been riding rear guard. "Pa, someone's following us!" Rhett's heart jumped. He wheeled his horse around, following Eli's pointing finger. There, far behind them, but definitely there, dark shapes moving through the snow. 3 riders, maybe 4, too distant to make out clearly, but coming in their direction. "Could be travelers," Lillian said, but her voice shook. "Could be anyone." "Could be," Rhett agreed. "But we're not waiting to find out. Everyone move faster. We need to reach the tree line before they get closer." They urged the horses into a faster pace, pushing through the snow toward the dark line of pine forest ahead. Rhett kept glancing back, watching the distant riders. They were gaining, moving with purpose. "They're following our tracks," Mara said tightly. "They know where we're going." "Then we'll lose them in the forest," Rhett said with more confidence than he felt. "Spread out, mix up the trail, come back together at the pass. Make it harder to track us." They hit the tree line with maybe a half-mile lead. The forest swallowed them immediately, thick pines blocking out the sun, the air suddenly still and muffled. Rhett made quick decisions, sending Mara and Eli one direction, taking Josie and Lillian another, everyone agreeing to meet at a distinctive rock formation Collins had marked on the map. "Stay quiet, move fast, cover your tracks when you can," Rhett ordered. "And if they find you—" "They won't," Mara interrupted. "We'll be careful." She and Eli disappeared into the trees, and Rhett had to force himself to trust they'd be okay. He turned to Lillian and Josie. "Stay close. Don't make noise. If I tell you to run, you run, and don't look back. Understood?" Lillian nodded, her face pale. Josie squeezed her doll tighter but lifted her chin bravely. They moved through the forest like ghosts, the horses picking their way carefully over roots and rocks. Rhett kept his rifle ready, every sense alert. Behind them, he could hear the other riders entering the forest. Shouts, the crack of branches, the jingle of harnesses. Too close. They were too close. "Here," Rhett whispered, spotting a narrow ravine. "Down into the ravine, follow it north. It'll hide our tracks." They descended carefully, the horses sliding a little on the steep slope. The ravine was narrow and dark, barely wider than the horses themselves. Perfect. They followed it for maybe 20 minutes, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. When Rhett finally called a halt, they were all breathing hard, tension singing through every nerve. "Did we lose them?" Josie whispered. "For now." Rhett dismounted, helped Josie down. "But they'll keep looking. We need to keep moving, get to that meeting point." "Rhett!" Lillian's voice was strained. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "Stop." Rhett moved to her horse, looked up at her. "This isn't your fault. It's Gideon's fault. It's his men's fault. Not yours. Understand?" She nodded, but guilt still shadowed her eyes. They found Mara and Eli at the rock formation 2 hours later, both safe but shaken. Mara had a scratch on her face from a low branch, and Eli's hands were trembling, but they were alive. "We saw them," Mara said immediately. "The riders. They passed within 50 feet of where we were hiding." "Did they see you?" "No, but Pa—" Mara's voice dropped. "They're not just searching randomly. They have a tracker with them, a man who kept dismounting, looking at the ground, pointing directions." A tracker. That complicated things significantly. "Then we don't stop," Rhett said grimly. "We push through to Cooper's Pass tonight, even if we have to ride in the dark. We need distance between us and them." "The horses," Eli started. "Will make it because they have to." Rhett's voice was hard. "We all will." They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, following game trails and old mining paths that were barely visible under the snow. The temperature dropped as the sun set, and soon they were moving through darkness broken only by starlight reflecting off the snow. It was dangerous, exhausting, brutal. The horses stumbled frequently. Josie fell asleep in her saddle and had to be tied on to keep from falling. Mara's face was white with cold and fatigue. Even Rhett felt his strength flagging, but they kept moving. Around midnight, Eli called out softly, "Pa, I see something, a structure." Rhett squinted through the darkness and saw it, a small building half buried in snow, the mining cabin Collins had mentioned. "Thank God," Lillian breathed. They approached carefully, Rhett with his rifle ready, but the cabin was empty, abandoned years ago by the look of it but still structurally sound. There was even wood stacked inside, dry enough to burn. "We'll shelter here for a few hours," Rhett decided. "Rest the horses, get warm, eat something hot. Then we move again before dawn." Getting everyone inside and settled took another hour. Rhett built a fire while Mara distributed food and Lillian tended to the horses. Eli helped Josie out of her wet clothes and into dry ones, then wrapped her in blankets near the fire. The cabin was small, barely room for all of them, but it was warm and dry and safe. For now. "We made it," Josie said sleepily, her head on Lillian's lap. We got away from the bad men. For now, Lillian said softly, stroking the child's hair. We got away for now. Rhett saw Mara watching them, something complicated in her expression, resentment and longing and grief all mixed together. She caught his eye and looked away quickly, moving to check the window. See anything? Rhett asked. No, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. Get some rest. I'll take first watch. Pa, you're exhausted. I'll take first watch, Rhett repeated firmly. 2-hour shifts. I'll wake Eli to relieve me, then he'll wake you. We keep someone alert at all times. Mara wanted to argue. He could see it in her face, but she was too tired to fight. She settled near the fire, wrapped in a blanket, and was asleep within minutes. Rhett positioned himself by the window, rifle across his knees, and stared out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, Gideon's men were searching, hunting, getting closer with every hour. Tomorrow they'd push into the high country, into terrain that was dangerous even without assassins on their trail. The passes would be treacherous, the weather unpredictable, the way unclear. But they had to try. Had to get Lillian to Helena, had to expose Gideon's crimes, had to make this nightmare mean something. Behind him, the fire crackled softly. His children slept, trusting him to keep them safe. Lillian dozed fitfully, the leather satchel clutched even in sleep. Rhett checked his rifle one more time, made sure the ammunition was within easy reach. And he kept watch as the night deepened and the cold settled in, and somewhere in the darkness, their hunters drew closer. The 2 hours Rhett had promised himself turned into 3, then 4. He couldn't make himself wake Eli, couldn't force his exhausted son to take watch when the boy had finally found some peace and sleep. So Rhett stayed at the window, his eyes burning, his body aching, watching the darkness gradually lighten to gray. He must have dozed off at some point because suddenly Lillian was shaking his shoulder, her voice urgent in his ear. Rhett, wake up, someone's outside. He jerked awake, instantly alert, his hand going to his rifle. Where? East side. I heard a horse whinny and it wasn't one of ours. Rhett moved to the opposite window, staying low, and peered out through a crack in the shutters. At first he saw nothing but snow and trees and the pale pre-dawn light. Then movement caught his eye. A figure on horseback, maybe 200 yards out, moving slowly through the pines. Just one? He whispered. I only heard one horse, but that doesn't mean... Wake the children, quietly, get them ready to move. Lillian nodded and moved to obey. Rhett kept watching the rider. The man was dismounted now, leading his horse, bent low over the ground, looking at tracks, their tracks. The tracker Mara had mentioned. Rhett's mind raced. They'd left tracks to this cabin, clear as day in the snow. The man would follow them here within minutes, and if he had companions nearby... Pa? Mara appeared beside him, fully dressed, her eyes sharp despite the early hour. How many? One that I can see, but assume more. Rhett turned to face his children. They were all awake now, frightened but trying to hide it. Josie clung to Lillian's hand. Eli had somehow gotten his boots on wrong, but was gamely trying to lace them anyway. We're leaving, right now, out the back, into the trees. Move fast, but stay quiet. What about the horses? Eli asked. We'll circle back for them once we've lost this tracker. Can't take them now, too noisy, too obvious. Rhett checked his rifle one more time, then looked at Lillian. You stay in the middle. Mara, you're behind her. Eli, you've got Josie. I'll bring up the rear. Nobody stops, nobody talks, nobody looks back unless I say so. Understood? They all nodded, white-faced but determined. Rhett eased the back door open, grateful it didn't creak. The cold hit them like a wall, stealing their breath. They filed out one by one, moving as quickly as they dared through snow that came up past their knees. Behind them, Rhett heard the tracker's horse nicker again, closer now, much closer. They pushed into the tree line 50 yards from the cabin just as Rhett heard a shout from behind them. The tracker had found the cabin. He'd be inside in seconds, would see the still warm fire, the signs of recent occupation, would know they couldn't be far. Faster, Rhett hissed, and they moved. The forest was thick here, the pines close together, branches heavy with snow. It was hard going, exhausting, each step a battle against the deep drifts. Josie whimpered once, and Eli scooped her up, carrying her despite his own fatigue. They'd gone maybe a quarter mile when Rhett heard it. More horses, more men, converging on the cabin. Angry voices calling out to each other. "They're tracking us," Mara panted. "They'll follow our trail." "I know." Rhett's mind was working frantically. They needed to break the trail, needed to confuse the trackers, needed time. His eyes landed on a frozen stream cutting through the forest. There, in the stream bed, water will hide our scent, ice will hide our tracks. They scrambled down the steep bank, sliding and stumbling. The stream was frozen solid, thank God, and wide enough to walk on. Rhett herded everyone upstream, away from the cabin, moving as fast as the slippery surface would allow. "How far do we go?" Lillian asked, her breath coming in gasps. "Until we find a place to climb out that won't show tracks." Rhett glanced back. No pursuit yet, but it was coming. "Keep moving." The stream twisted through the forest, and they followed it blindly, trusting to luck and desperation. Josie had gone silent in Eli's arms, her face pressed against his shoulder. Mara was breathing hard but keeping pace. Lillian stumbled once, went to her knees on the ice, and Rhett caught her arm. "I'm slowing you down," she gasped. "Leave me." "Not a chance." He hauled her upright, practically dragged her forward. "Move." They'd traveled maybe half a mile upstream when Rhett spotted what he was looking for, a rocky outcropping that came right down to the stream's edge, bare stone that wouldn't hold tracks. "Here, climb up. Use the rocks." It was brutal work. The rocks were icy, treacherous, and the climb was nearly vertical in places. But one by one they made it up, Eli passing Josie to Mara, then scrambling up himself. Lillian went next with Rhett pushing from below, his hands on her back, steadying her when she slipped. Finally, Rhett himself climbed up, muscles screaming, and pulled himself over the top. They were on a small plateau, thick with pines, the ground rocky enough that their footprints weren't obvious. "Catch your breath," Rhett said quietly. "1 minute, then we move." They stood gasping in the cold air, steam rising from their mouths. Below them, Rhett could hear shouts getting closer. The trackers had reached the stream, were trying to figure out which direction their quarry had gone. "They'll search both directions," Mara said softly. "Probably. But it'll take time, and time is what we need." Rhett looked around, getting his bearings. The sun was fully up now, and he could see the mountains rising to the north and west. Cooper's Pass should be somewhere ahead, through those peaks. We head northwest, stay in the rocks where we can, trees where we can't. We're trying to reach the high country. "Without horses?" Lillian's voice was despairing. "Rhett, we'll never make it. We don't have a choice." His voice was harder than he intended, and he forced himself to gentle it. "Those horses are either captured or scattered by now. We go on foot, or we don't go at all." They moved through the morning, a desperate flight across treacherous terrain. The temperature was dropping as they climbed higher, and the wind picked up, cutting through their clothes like knives. Josie couldn't walk anymore, too exhausted, too cold, so Rhett and Eli took turns carrying her. Around midday they stopped in a small cave, really just an overhang of rock, to rest and eat. The food was meager, jerky, and hardtack, but it gave them energy. Rhett divided it carefully, knowing they'd need to make their supplies last. "How far to Cooper's Pass?" Mara asked, chewing the tough jerky. Rhett consulted Collins's map and compass, trying to orient himself. "Maybe 10 miles. But in this terrain, with the snow," he shook his head. "Could take us 2 days to cover it." "We don't have 2 days," Lillian said quietly. "Those men won't give up, and they know these mountains better than we do." "How do you know that?" "Because Gideon wouldn't send amateurs. He'd send men who know how to hunt, how to track, how to survive in conditions like this." She hugged herself, shivering despite the relative shelter of the overhang. "He'd send men who won't stop until we're dead." Josie made a small, frightened sound, and Lillian immediately looked stricken. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I shouldn't have said—" "It's okay," Josie said in a tiny voice. "I know there are bad men. Pa said we have to be brave." "And you are brave," Lillian said fiercely, pulling the little girl close. "The bravest girl I've ever met." Eli stood near the edge of the overhang, keeping watch. He'd been quiet all morning, his young face drawn with fatigue and worry. Now he turned back to his father. "Pa, I think I see smoke. To the south. Rhett joined him, following his son's pointing finger. There, a thin column of gray against the white landscape. Someone had built a fire. Maybe at the cabin they'd abandoned, maybe somewhere else. They're still looking, Rhett said. But they're not close yet. Come on, we keep moving. They climbed through the afternoon, following game trails and instinct more than any map. The terrain grew steeper, rockier, more exposed. The wind howled across the bare slopes, and snow began to fall again, not the gentle flakes of a normal storm, but hard, driving pellets of ice that stung exposed skin. Mara slipped on a patch of ice and went down hard, her cry of pain echoing off the rocks. Rhett was beside her in an instant. "My ankle!" she gasped, her face white. "I think I twisted it." He examined it carefully. Swollen already, probably sprained. Not broken, thank God, but painful. "Can you walk?" "I have to, don't I?" Mara's voice was sharp with pain and frustration. "We can't stop." "We can if we need to." "No." She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in. "Pa, we can't." Josie can barely move. Eli's exhausted. Dr. Ward looks like she's about to collapse. "If we stop now..." Her voice broke. "We have to keep going." So they did. Mara limped along on her injured ankle, refusing help, her jaw set against the pain. They moved slower now, much slower, and Rhett felt panic clawing at his chest. At this pace, in this weather, they'd never make the pass before dark. And spending a night exposed on this mountain, he couldn't think about that. Couldn't let himself imagine what would happen if they didn't find shelter. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the snow gold and orange, they crested a ridge and looked down into a narrow valley. And there, nestled against the far slope, was a structure. Small, half buried in snow, but definitely man-made. "Another mining cabin?" Eli asked hopefully. Rhett studied it through the fading light. "Maybe. Or a trapper's shelter. Either way, it's our best chance." Getting down into the valley took another hour of careful descent. Full darkness had fallen by the time they reached the structure, and Rhett could barely see his hand in front of his face. But his fingers found a door, found a latch, and miraculously it opened. The inside was pitch black and freezing, but it was shelter. Rhett got them all inside, found his matches with numb fingers, managed to light one. The brief flare of light revealed a single room, empty except for some old crates and a crude stone fireplace. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'm going to find wood." "Pa, you can't go back out," Mara started. 5 minutes. I'll stay close." He was already moving toward the door. "Bar it behind me. Don't open it unless you hear me knock 3 times. Outside, the wind had picked up even more, and the darkness was absolute. Rhett felt his way along the wall of the cabin, found a small lean-to attached to the back, and nearly cried with relief when his hands encountered stacked wood. It was old, probably rotted, but it would burn. He gathered as much as he could carry and made his way back around to the door. 3 sharp knocks and Eli opened it immediately. The fire took some coaxing, the wood was damp and stubborn, but eventually Rhett got it going. Weak flames grew to something stronger, and slowly, painfully, warmth began to fill the small space. They huddled around it, too tired to do more than stare into the flames. Rhett distributed the last of their food, precious little, barely enough to count as a meal. Josie ate without complaint, too exhausted to fuss. Mara held her swollen ankle toward the fire, her face tight with pain. Eli leaned against the wall and was asleep within seconds. Lillian sat apart from the others, the leather satchel in her lap, her expression haunted. "This is my fault," she said softly. "We've had this conversation," Rhett replied, too tired to put much force behind the words. "No, I mean..." She gestured at the children, at the bare room, at everything. "Your daughter's ankle is injured. Your children are starving and freezing. You've lost your horses, your supplies, everything, because of me." "Because of Gideon," Rhett corrected. "Because of evil men doing evil things. Don't take that burden on yourself." "But I brought it to your door, and I opened that door. My choice." He poked at the fire, sending up sparks. "Lillian, you can't control everything. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and all we can do is survive them and try to do better." She was quiet for a long moment. Your wife, Sarah. How did she, if you don't mind my asking?" Rhett was silent, staring into the flames. He rarely talked about Sarah's death, couldn't bear to put the memories into words. But here, in this cold shelter, with death possibly hunting them, the usual walls felt pointless. "Cancer," he said finally. "Started in her stomach, spread everywhere. By the time we realized it wasn't just ordinary sickness, it was too late. The doctor in town did what he could, but..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "She lasted 6 months after the diagnosis. 6 months of watching her waste away, of watching her smile and pretend she wasn't in agony, of knowing every day might be the last. I'm so sorry." The worst part was telling the children. Mara understood immediately. She's always been too smart for her own good. Eli went quiet, just stopped talking for weeks. And Josie, his voice roughened. Josie kept asking when Mama would get better, when she could play with her again. Even at the end, even when Sarah could barely breathe, Josie didn't understand she was dying. Lillian reached out, covered his hand with hers. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. "You've held this family together through impossible grief," she said quietly. "That takes remarkable strength. Or remarkable stubbornness." Rhett attempted a smile. "My children deserve better than a father who's barely holding on. Your children deserve exactly the father they have, one who loves them enough to risk everything to teach them what's right." Lillian squeezed his hand. "Don't doubt that. Whatever happens, don't ever doubt that." They sat in silence, hands clasped, watching the fire burn. Outside, the wind screamed and the temperature dropped, and somewhere in the darkness their hunters searched. But for this moment, they were alive. They were together. They were safe. It would have to be enough. Rhett woke to Eli shaking his shoulder frantically, the boy's eyes wide with fear in the dim light. Pa, wake up. Someone's outside." Rhett was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, every sense alert. The fire had burned down to embers, and pale dawn light was filtering through cracks in the walls. He could hear it now, voices outside, men's voices, speaking in low, urgent tones. "How many?" he whispered. "I don't know. At least 3. Maybe more." Mara was awake now too, her face pale. She had Josie clutched against her, one hand over the little girl's mouth to keep her quiet. Lillian stood frozen near the back wall, the satchel pressed to her chest. "Tracks lead here, I'm telling you," a voice said from outside, clear enough now that Rhett could make out the words. "They're inside, or they were recently." "Then we go in and get them," another voice replied, harder, colder. "Mr. Blackstone wants that woman alive if possible, but if she resists..." A pause. "Well, accidents happen." Rhett's mind raced. They were trapped. The cabin had only one door, one window, no back exit. If those men came in... His eyes landed on the fireplace. It was large, built for heating and cooking, the opening big enough that a person could crouch inside. And chimneys went up, not down. "Eli," he breathed. "The chimney. Can you climb it?" Eli looked at the fireplace, then back at his father. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I think so. Take Josie. Get her up and out. There's a ledge on the roof. I saw it last night. Hide there. Don't come down no matter what you hear. Understand? But Pa... Now!" The voices were getting closer, boots crunching in the snow right outside the door. Eli grabbed Josie, who'd started to cry, and moved to the fireplace. The embers were nearly cold, thank God. He boosted Josie up into the chimney. She was small enough to fit easily, and then pulled himself up after her. Rhett heard their scrambling echoes, heard Josie's muffled sob, and then silence. "Mara, you too," Rhett ordered. "No." Mara's voice was absolute. "I'm staying." "Mara, my ankle's too swollen. I'd slow them down and we'd all get caught." She limped to the door, picked up a heavy piece of firewood like a club. "I'm staying." There was no time to argue. The door handle was turning, someone testing it from outside. "Lillian, hide," Rhett whispered urgently, positioning himself beside the door, rifle ready. "Under those crates? Behind them? Anywhere." But Lillian shook her head. She was pale as death, but her eyes were clear, determined. "No more hiding, no more running. She set the satchel carefully in the corner, covering it with an old tarp. If they want me, they'll have to take me. The door burst open. 3 men rushed in, pistols drawn, moving with the confidence of professionals. They stopped when they saw Rhett's rifle pointed at them, when they saw Mara with her makeshift weapon, when they saw Lillian standing defiant in the center of the small room. "Well, well," the lead man said. He was in his 40s, well-dressed despite the harsh travel, with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Dr. Ward, Mr. Blackstone has been so worried about you." "I'm sure he has," Lillian replied, her voice steady, "since I have evidence that will hang him." "Evidence?" The man's smile widened. "You mean this?" He pulled something from his coat, the leather satchel, the real one. Rhett's heart sank. They must have found it in the first cabin with the horses. Lillian's face went ashen, but she recovered quickly. "That's not the only copy." "No?" The man looked genuinely curious. "Then where—" His eyes swept the cabin, landed on the tarp-covered bundle in the corner. "Ah!" He moved toward it. Rhett shifted his rifle, tracking him. "That's far enough." The man froze, held up his hands. "Easy now. Nobody needs to get hurt here. Mr. Blackstone just wants his property back, his records, his—" He glanced at Lillian. "His mother-in-law safely returned to proper medical care." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lillian said flatly. "I'm afraid that's not your choice to make." The man nodded, and the other 2 moved to flank Rhett and Mara. "Now, you seem like reasonable people. Rancher, you've got children to think about. I assume those are your children who climbed out the chimney?" "Yes, we heard them. They won't get far in this cold." Rhett's blood ran cold. They knew. They knew Eli and Josie were out there, exposed, vulnerable. "Here's what's going to happen," the man continued, his voice almost gentle. "You're going to put down that rifle. Your daughter's going to drop that firewood, and Dr. Ward is going to come with us quietly. Then we all leave, no one gets hurt, and you can go collect your children and go home to your ranch." "And if we refuse?" Rhett asked. The man's smile vanished. "Then my associates will shoot you both, burn this cabin with you in it, and we'll track down those children anyway. 2 cold, scared kids alone on a mountain, they won't last an hour." It was a trap, perfectly sprung. Rhett had no good options. If he shot this man, the others would fire. If he surrendered, they'd take Lillian and probably kill the rest of them anyway to eliminate witnesses. But before he could make a decision, Lillian moved. She stepped forward, placing herself between Rhett and the gunman. "I'll go with you, willingly. Just leave them alone. Leave the children alone." "Lillian, no," Rhett started. "It's my fight, Rhett. It always has been." She looked back at him, and her eyes were full of gratitude and sorrow and something that looked almost like peace. "Thank you for everything. For showing me that there are still good people in this world. For giving me a family, even if only for a few days." "Very touching," the lead man said. "Now come along, Dr. Ward. We have a long ride back." Lillian walked toward them slowly, her head high. She passed within arm's reach of Rhett, and he saw her mouth 2 words. The copies. The copies. The papers she'd been making at the ranch, the duplicate records she'd been creating. They were still there, still hidden under that tarp. The gunman had the original ledger, but not the copies. Understanding flashed between them in that instant. Lillian would go, would buy them time, would let herself be captured, but the evidence would remain. The truth would survive. One of the men grabbed Lillian's arm roughly, started to pull her toward the door. She stumbled, deliberately, Rhett realized, and fell against the wall near the fireplace. Her hands moved quickly, and something small dropped into the ashes. The photograph, Rhett realized, the picture of Catherine and baby Emma. The lead man noticed. "What did you drop?" "Nothing, just—" Lillian's voice broke. "Please, can I at least say goodbye?" Sentimental. But the man nodded. "Make it quick." Lillian turned to Mara first, pulled the girl into a fierce hug. "Take care of your brothers," she whispered, loud enough for Rhett to hear. "And your father. He needs you, even if he doesn't say it." Mara was crying, clutching Lillian tight. "Don't go, please don't go." "I have to, sweetheart. But you're going to be fine. You're so strong, so brave." Lillian kissed her forehead. "I'm proud to have known you. Then she turned to Rhett. She didn't hug him, the gunmen were watching too closely, but she took his hand, squeezed it hard. "Get those copies to Judge Whitaker," she said quietly. "Finish this. For Catherine. For Emma. For all of them." "I will," Rhett promised. "I swear it." "And Rhett, tell Josie and Eli—" Her voice broke. "Tell them their Grandma Lillian loved them. Tell them to be brave." "That's enough," the lead man said impatiently. He grabbed Lillian's arm again, yanked her toward the door. "Let's go." They were taking her. Right in front of him, they were taking her, and Rhett couldn't stop it without getting everyone killed. His finger tightened on the rifle trigger, every instinct screaming to fight, to shoot, to do something. "Pa," Mara whispered, "the children. Think about the children." She was right. God help him. She was right. If he fought now, Eli and Josie would be left orphans on a frozen mountain. So he watched, helpless and raging, as they dragged Lillian out into the snow. Watched as they tied her hands, lifted her onto a horse. Watched as they rode away, taking her back to Gideon, to imprisonment or death, or worse. The lead man paused at the edge of the clearing, looked back. "Smart choice, rancher. Now get your family home, and forget you ever met Dr. Lillian Ward." Then they were gone, swallowed by the forest, leaving only hoofprints in the snow. Rhett stood frozen for a long moment, still gripping his rifle, his whole body shaking with impotent fury. Then Mara was crying, collapsed on the floor, and he had to move, had to function, had to be a father. "Eli, Josie," he called up the chimney. "It's safe! Come down!" Scrambling sounds, and then both children dropped down into the fireplace, covered in soot, shaking with cold and fear. Josie ran to Rhett, and he caught her up, held her tight. "Where's Grandma Lillian?" she sobbed. "Where did they take her?" "Away," Rhett said roughly. They took her away. We have to get her back." Josie pulled back, her small face fierce through the soot and tears. "Pa, we have to save her." "We will," Rhett promised, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "We will save her, but first we need to finish what she started." He moved to the corner, pulled away the tarp, and found the stack of papers Lillian had hidden there. The copies, names, dates, payments, all the evidence they needed, transcribed in Lillian's careful handwriting. "What is that?" Eli asked. "Justice," Rhett said grimly. "This is how we save her, how we save all of them." He looked at his children, wounded, exhausted, terrified, but still standing, still fighting. "We get these papers to Judge Whitaker and Helena. We expose Gideon Blackstone for what he is, and we don't stop until Lillian is free and every stolen child is returned home." "How?" Mara asked. Her face was blotchy from crying, but her voice was steady. "Pa, they took our horses. We have no supplies. We're barely armed. How are we supposed to make it 300 miles? Rhett looked at the papers in his hands, then at his children, then out the door at the endless white wilderness. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we're going to try, because that's what family does. We don't give up on each other." He gathered them close, all three of his children, held them in the small cold cabin while the morning light grew stronger outside, and he made a silent vow to Lillian, wherever she was, whatever Gideon's men were doing to her. "I will finish this. I will make it right. I will bring you home, even if it kills me." They stayed in the cabin just long enough for Rhett to make a plan. It wasn't much of a plan, more like a desperate series of choices strung together with hope and stubbornness. But it was something. They couldn't go back the way they'd come. Gideon's men would be watching that route, expecting them to retreat to the ranch. So forward was their only option, even though forward meant higher elevations, worse weather, and terrain that could kill them as surely as any bullet. Rhett wrapped Lillian's copied documents in oilcloth he found in one of the old crates, then tucked the bundle inside his coat against his chest. The photograph of Catherine and Emma, retrieved from the ashes, went in there too. Physical proof, physical memory, both precious beyond measure. "We need food," Mara said practically, though her voice was still thick from crying. "We'll starve before we make it halfway to Helena." "We'll hunt," Rhett said. "Set snares, catch what we can. It's not ideal, but people have survived on less." "People who weren't being hunted," Eli pointed out quietly. "Then we'll have to be smarter than our hunters." Rhett checked his rifle. counted his remaining ammunition. 12 bullets, not nearly enough. We move during the day when we can see, hole up at night. We avoid open ground, stick to the trees, and we don't stop for anything except absolute necessity. Josie had been sitting silently in the corner, clutching her soot-stained doll, her small face blank with shock. Now she spoke up, her voice very small. "Is Grandma Lillian going to die?" The question hung in the cold air. Rhett wanted to lie, wanted to promise everything would be fine, but he'd never lied to his children, and he wouldn't start now. "I don't know," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "But I know she's strong, and I know she's survived a long time running from bad men. She won't give up easily." "What will they do to her?" "Josie," Mara started, but Rhett held up a hand. "They'll take her to Gideon Blackstone," he said carefully, "and he'll try to make her tell him where the rest of the evidence is. But she's smart, and she'll hold out as long as she can, which means we need to move fast, get these papers to the judge before Gideon realizes she made copies." "And then?" Josie's eyes were huge, desperate for reassurance. "And then we save her? And then we save her," Rhett promised, praying he could keep that promise. They left the cabin mid-morning, stepping back out into a world that seemed determined to freeze them solid. The wind had picked up again, driving snow horizontally across the landscape. Visibility was maybe 20 feet on a good moment, less than 10 most of the time. It was treacherous traveling weather, but it also meant anyone tracking them would have just as hard a time seeing. Rhett led them northwest, using the compass Collins had given him and his own knowledge of mountain terrain. They followed ridge lines when possible, staying below the exposed peaks, but above the valleys where drifts would be deepest. It was exhausting work, every step a conscious effort, muscles screaming with cold and fatigue. Mara's ankle was worse. Rhett could see it in the way she bit her lip against pain, the way she couldn't quite hide her limp no matter how hard she tried. But she never complained, never asked to stop, just kept moving with the same stubborn determination that had gotten her through her mother's death and everything after. By afternoon, they'd covered maybe 5 miles. Rhett knew it wasn't enough, wasn't nearly fast enough, but pushing harder would mean risking injury or exhaustion that would stop them completely. They needed to pace themselves, needed to survive long enough to matter. "Pa," Eli said suddenly, pointing. "Look." Ahead, barely visible through the snow, was movement. Rhett's hand went to his rifle automatically, then he saw what Eli had spotted. Not men. Animals. A small herd of elk, maybe 8 or 10 of them, moving slowly through the trees. Fresh meat, energy, survival. "Wait here," Rhett whispered. "Don't move, don't make a sound." He crept forward, using the trees and wind for cover, getting as close as he dared. The elk were nervous, sensing something wrong, but they hadn't bolted yet. Rhett picked out a cow on the edge of the herd, raised his rifle, steadied his breathing. The shot cracked across the mountainside, and the herd exploded into motion. But the cow went down, clean hit, and Rhett felt a surge of fierce gratitude. They would eat tonight. They would survive another day. Dressing the elk in the field was messy, cold work, but Rhett had done it 100 times. He took what they could carry, the best cuts, the organs that would keep them strong, and left the rest. It felt wasteful, but they couldn't manage more without proper equipment. "Will other animals come for what's left?" Josie asked, watching him work. "Yes, bears, wolves, coyotes. That's the way of things." Rhett wrapped the meat in cloth from his pack. Nothing goes to waste in nature. They found shelter that night in a shallow cave, barely deep enough to protect them from the wind, but better than nothing. Rhett built a small fire at the cave mouth, just large enough to cook some of the elk meat. The smell was intoxicating, rich and savory, and they ate like starving wolves, tearing into the food with desperate hunger. "Best thing I ever tasted," Mara said around a mouthful, and despite everything, Rhett smiled. "Hunger's the best seasoning," he agreed. After they'd eaten, after Josie had curled up against Eli and both of them had fallen into exhausted sleep, Rhett sat watch while Mara stayed awake beside him. Her ankle was propped up, wrapped in strips of cloth, swollen to twice its normal size. "It's bad, isn't it?" she said quietly. "It's not good," Rhett admitted. "Might be more than a sprain, could be a small fracture." "Will I be able to walk on it?" "For now. But if you push too hard—" He didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what happened if her ankle gave out completely, this far from help. Mara stared into the fire, her face troubled. "I'm sorry I was so awful to her, to Dr. Ward. I was just scared," Rhett supplied gently. "You were protecting your heart. There's no shame in that." "But I was wrong," Mara's voice cracked. "She was good and brave, and she cared about us, and I treated her like she was the enemy, and now she's gone, and I never got to tell her." She stopped, pressed her fist against her mouth to hold back a sob. Rhett put his arm around her shoulders, pulled her close. "You'll get the chance. We're going to get her back, Mara. I promise you." "You can't promise that." "Not really." "No," he agreed. "I can't. But I can promise to try with everything I have. And sometimes that's all we can do." They sat in silence, father and daughter, watching the fire burn down. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature dropped and the mountains loomed dark and dangerous all around them. The next 3 days blurred together into a continuous nightmare of cold, exhaustion, and fear. They walked until they couldn't walk anymore, slept in whatever shelter they could find, ate what little remained of the elk meat. Rhett set snares at night and checked them in the morning, occasionally catching a rabbit or squirrel, not much, but enough to keep them going. Josie stopped asking questions, stopped chattering. She just walked, her hand gripping Eli's, her face blank with fatigue. Eli had grown quieter too, more withdrawn, but his eyes stayed sharp, constantly scanning their surroundings for danger. And Mara was struggling. Her ankle was getting worse, not better. She tried to hide it, but Rhett saw how much pain she was in, saw her stumble more frequently, saw the way she had to stop and rest more often. On the 4th day after leaving the cabin, they crested a ridge and looked down into a valley where Rhett could see buildings. A town. Small, maybe just a mining camp or way station, but civilization. Help. "We can't go down there," Eli said immediately, and Rhett was proud of his son's thinking. "If Gideon's men are looking for us, they'll be watching the towns," Rhett finished. "I know, but we need supplies, real food, medicine for Mara's ankle, maybe information about the route ahead." "So what do we do?" Rhett studied the town, thinking. "We wait until dark. Then I go down alone, quietly. Buy what we need, find out what I can, get back before dawn." "That's dangerous," Mara protested. "If they recognize you?" "They won't. I'm just another rancher passing through." Rhett tried to sound more confident than he felt. "Besides, we don't have a choice. We're out of food, out of options. This is our best chance." They spent the afternoon hidden in the trees above the town, watching. It was small, maybe 20 buildings total, clustered around what looked like a mine entrance. Men moved between the buildings, going about their business, and Rhett saw no obvious signs of Gideon's people. But that didn't mean they weren't there. As the sun set, Rhett prepared to go down. He made sure the documents were safely hidden in Mara's pack, made sure the children understood they were to stay hidden and quiet no matter what. "If I'm not back by dawn," he said, hating the words even as he spoke them, "head northwest. Keep following the compass bearing. Eventually you'll hit the main Helena Road. Flag down a wagon. Tell them you need to get to Judge Whitaker. Give him the documents." "Pa, no!" Josie started to cry, and Rhett knelt down, pulled her into a fierce hug. "I'll be back," he promised. "But just in case, you need to know what to do. Can you be brave for me?" Josie nodded against his chest, her small body shaking with sobs. Rhett hugged each of his children in turn, then started down the slope as darkness fell. The town had a few lights burning, and he could hear voices, the sound of a piano from what must be a saloon. Normal sounds. The sounds of people living their lives, unaware of the desperate fugitives hiding in the mountains above. Rhett approached carefully, using the darkness and the buildings for cover. His first stop was the general store. Still open, thank God, with a lamp burning in the window. He slipped inside, trying to look casual despite his ragged appearance. The storekeeper was an older man with suspicious eyes. "Help you?" "Need supplies," Rhett said, keeping his voice low. "Food, medicine, ammunition if you have it." "Ammunition's expensive right now. High demand." The storekeeper's eyes narrowed. "You look like you've been through hell. Trouble up in the mountains?" "Just bad weather and worse luck." Rhett selected items as he spoke. jerky, hardtack, coffee, bandages. Got turned around in the storm, lost most of my gear. Where you headed? North. Got family in Helena. It was close enough to the truth. The storekeeper rang up the purchases. The prices probably inflated, but Rhett didn't argue. He was counting out coins when the door opened behind him and two men walked in. Rhett's blood went cold. He recognized them instantly, not from seeing them before, but from the way they moved, the expensive quality of their clothes despite the hard travel, the way their eyes swept the store with professional assessment. Gideon's men. "Evening," one of them said pleasantly. "Cold night." "That it is," the storekeeper agreed. Rhett kept his head down, kept gathering his purchases, praying they wouldn't look too closely at him. But luck had never been his friend. "Say," the second man said, his voice casual but his gaze sharp on Rhett. "You wouldn't happen to have seen an older woman pass through here, would you? Gray hair, traveling alone or maybe with some children?" "Can't say I have," the storekeeper replied. "What's she done?" "Family matter. Inheritance dispute, very messy." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're her lawyers, trying to sort everything out. There's a reward for information about her whereabouts." Rhett felt the weight of the documents pressed against his chest under his coat. These men were looking for Lillian, looking for them. And if they recognized him— "How much of a reward?" the storekeeper asked, interest sharpening his voice. "Substantial. $50 for confirmed information." The first man pulled out a photograph, and Rhett's heart stopped. It was Lillian, younger but unmistakable. "She's dangerous, possibly delusional. If anyone's seen her, they should let us know immediately." The storekeeper studied the photograph, then looked at Rhett with new speculation. "You see this woman up in the mountains?" Rhett met his eyes steadily. "No, like I said, weather was bad. Couldn't see much of anything." The storekeeper didn't look convinced, but he turned back to Gideon's men. "I'll keep an eye out. Where can I reach you if I hear something?" "We're staying at the hotel, room 3. The man tucked the photograph away. "Any information at all, day or night." They left, and Rhett forced himself to finish his transaction calmly, to not rush, to not give any sign he was anything other than what he claimed, a lost rancher passing through. But his hands shook slightly as he gathered his purchases. "You sure you didn't see nothing up there?" the storekeeper pressed. $50 is good money." "I'm sure," Rhett met his eyes. "But if I do hear anything, I'll let you know." He left before the storekeeper could ask more questions, slipping back into the darkness with his heart pounding. They were here. Gideon's men were here, showing Lillian's photograph, offering rewards, which meant the whole territory would be looking for her, and for anyone traveling with her. Rhett made it back to where he'd left the children, climbing through the darkness with supplies weighing him down. They were awake and alert, Mara with a large stick held like a weapon, Eli positioned to protect Josie. "Pa," Josie whispered, relief flooding her voice. "We need to move," Rhett said without preamble. "Now. They're in town, showing Lillian's picture, offering rewards. We can't stay anywhere near here." They gathered their things and pushed deeper into the mountains, traveling by starlight and sheer determination. It was insane, dangerous, suicidal even, but staying was certain capture. They walked through the night, stumbling over roots and rocks, branches whipping at their faces. Mara was in agony, Rhett could tell, but she kept moving. Josie dozed on his back, secured there with rope. Eli led the way, somehow finding paths through the darkness that Rhett couldn't see. Dawn found them miles from the town, high in the mountains where the air was thin and every breath burned. They collapsed in a small clearing, too exhausted to go further. "How much farther?" Mara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Rhett consulted the compass and his increasingly battered map. "Maybe 80 miles to Helena. If we can manage 10 miles a day, 8 days, Eli calculated. Can we make it that long?" Could they? Rhett looked at his children, exhausted, hungry, cold, but alive, still fighting, still believing in him. "We'll make it," he said. "We have to, for Lillian, for all those children." "Tell us about them," Josie said suddenly. She was wrapped in a blanket, her doll tucked under her arm, looking impossibly small and young. "About the babies Dr. Ward is trying to save." Rhett pulled out the documents, opened them carefully. Names and dates stared back at him, each one representing a stolen life, a destroyed family. Emma Ward, he read. 3 years old. Taken from her mother the day she was born, sold to a family in Denver for $2,000. That's Grandma Lillian's granddaughter, Josie said. The one in the picture. Yes. Rhett continued reading. Michael Porter, 6 months old. Mother was told he died at birth, but he was sold to a banker in Colorado Springs for $1,500. Why would anyone do that? Eli asked, his young face twisted with incomprehension. Why would they steal babies? Money, Mara said bitterly. It's always about money, isn't it? Not just money, Rhett corrected. Power. Control. Gideon Blackstone is the kind of man who sees people as things to be used, to be sold, to be disposed of when they're no longer useful. He killed Lillian's daughter when she tried to stop him. He'll kill Lillian too if we don't get these documents to someone who can stop him. Then we keep going, Josie said with the absolute certainty of childhood. We keep going and we save them all. From the mouths of babes, Rhett thought again. His 7-year-old daughter understood what needed to be done, understood the stakes. How could he do any less? They rested for 2 hours, then moved on. The next several days passed in a blur of pain and perseverance. The mountains tested them constantly. Steep climbs, treacherous descents, weather that shifted from brutal cold to blinding snowstorms without warning. They ran out of food again, survived on what Rhett could catch and what they could forage. Mara's ankle got worse despite rest and treatment. Josie developed a cough that worried Rhett terribly. Eli grew so thin his clothes hung off him like rags. But they kept moving. On the 7th day, they crested a final ridge and looked down at a sight that made Rhett's heart soar. A road. A real maintained road with wagon tracks and signs of regular traffic. And in the distance, the buildings of a real town. Not a mining camp or way station, but an actual town with church steeples and what looked like a courthouse. Helena. We made it, Mara breathed. Oh God, Pa, we actually made it. Not yet, Rhett cautioned, though he felt the same surge of hope. We still need to find Judge Whitaker, get the documents to him safely. Gideon's men could still— Freeze! Don't move! The voice came from behind them, sharp with authority. Rhett spun around and found himself facing 5 men on horseback, all armed, all pointing weapons at him and his children. His hand moved toward his rifle, but one of the men shook his head. I wouldn't. We've got you outgunned and surrounded. Rhett's mind raced. Were these Gideon's men? More bounty hunters looking for the reward? Or— One of the riders moved forward, and Rhett saw a star pinned to his coat. A badge. Law enforcement. I'm Federal Marshal James Cooper, the man said, his voice firm but not unkind. We've been tracking you for 3 days. Are you Rhett Dawson? Rhett's throat was dry. This could go either way. These men could be honest lawmen, or they could be on Gideon's payroll. He made a decision, chose to trust. I am, he said, and I have evidence of crimes that need to reach Judge Isaiah Whitaker immediately. Children stolen, families destroyed, murder covered up. It's all here. He touched his coat where the documents rested. Marshal Cooper's expression didn't change. We know. Dr. Lillian Ward managed to get word to us before— He stopped, and something in his face made Rhett's stomach drop. Before what? Rhett demanded. Where is she? What happened? She's alive, Cooper said quickly. But she's in Blackstone's custody, and the situation is complicated. We need to get you and these children to safety, and then we need to talk. Now, are you going to come peacefully, or do we have to do this the hard way? Rhett looked at his children, Josie sagging with relief, Eli watching carefully. Mara with tears streaming down her face. They'd made it. After everything, they'd made it to law enforcement, to help, to hope. We'll come peacefully, Rhett said, lowering his rifle. But Marshal, Lillian Ward saved my life and risked everything to protect innocent children. If you're going to tell me there's nothing we can do to help her— I'm not telling you that, Cooper interrupted. I'm telling you we have work to do, and it starts now. So mount up, all of you. We're going to Judge Whitaker. We're going to end this thing, and then— His smile was grim. Then we're going to bring down Gideon Blackstone's entire operation, every last piece of it. The marshals gave them horses, blankets, food. Within an hour, they were riding into Helena, not as fugitives or hunted prey, but as witnesses under federal protection. The town was larger than Rhett had imagined, with proper streets and buildings, people going about their business in the late afternoon sun. Marshal Cooper led them straight to the courthouse, a substantial brick building that radiated authority and permanence. Inside, they were taken to a large office where a man sat behind an imposing desk, reading documents by lamplight. Judge Isaiah Whitaker was in his 60s, Rhett guessed, with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as they entered, and his gaze swept over Rhett and the children with sharp assessment. "Mr. Dawson," he said, his voice deep and measured, "Marshal Cooper tells me you have evidence regarding the Blackstone matter." "I do." Rhett pulled out the documents, laid them on the desk. Everything Dr. Ward could remember from the original ledger: names, dates, payments, proof of illegal adoption, stolen children, payoffs to corrupt officials. Whitaker picked up the papers, began reading. His expression grew darker with each page. Finally, he set them down and looked at Rhett. "This is substantial," he said. "Combined with Dr. Ward's testimony and what we've already begun investigating, this should be enough to issue warrants, make arrests, start the process of recovering the children." "Should be?" Rhett's voice was tight. "Judge, that woman sacrificed everything for this. She's in Gideon Blackstone's custody right now, probably being tortured or worse. We need to act immediately, and we will," Whitaker interrupted firmly. "But we need to do this right, Mr. Dawson. If we move too quickly, if we don't have our evidence in order, Blackstone will slip through our fingers and we'll never get another chance." "How long?" Mara spoke up, her voice hoarse but determined. "How long before you move on him?" Whitaker studied her for a moment, and Rhett saw respect flicker in his eyes. 2 days. Maybe 3. I need to coordinate with federal marshals, get warrants signed by multiple judges to prevent any single point of corruption, arrange for secure custody of the children once we recover them. It's complicated. "She might not have 2 days, Rhett said desperately. "Judge, please." "Which is why Marshal Cooper has already sent men to observe Blackstone's residence," Whitaker said calmly. "If there's any indication Dr. Ward is in immediate danger, they have orders to intervene. But Mr. Dawson, Gideon Blackstone is a careful man. He won't kill Dr. Ward quickly. He'll want to know if she has more evidence hidden, if she's told others, if there are more copies of his records. That gives us time." It was cold comfort, but it was something. Rhett sagged in his chair, suddenly feeling every mile they'd traveled, every hour without sleep, every moment of fear and desperation. "Your children need medical attention," Whitaker continued, his voice gentler now. "And you need rest. Marshal Cooper will see you settled at a hotel under protection. In the morning, we'll go over your testimony in detail, make sure we have everything we need, and then—" His expression hardened. "Then we'll bring Gideon Blackstone to justice. I give you my word." The hotel room felt impossibly luxurious after weeks of mountains and cabins and cold. Real beds, hot water, food that didn't have to be caught or cooked over an open fire. A doctor came to examine them, pronounced Mara's ankle badly sprained but not broken, gave Josie medicine for her cough, warned them all they were dangerously underweight and exhausted. That night, as his children finally slept in real beds under warm blankets, Rhett stood at the window and looked out over Helena. Somewhere in this town or nearby, Lillian was imprisoned, scared, alone, waiting for rescue that might come too late. "We're coming," he whispered to the darkness. "Hold on just a little longer. We're coming." And in his coat pocket, the photograph of Catherine and Emma seemed to weigh more than paper should. A reminder of all the lives hanging in the balance, all the children waiting to be brought home. 2 days, Whitaker had said. 2 days to organize the raid, to coordinate the marshals, to do everything right. 2 days felt like an eternity. But they'd come this far. They'd survived mountains and hunters and starvation and cold. They could survive 2 more days. They had to, because Lillian Ward was counting on them. And the Dawson family didn't abandon their own. Those 2 days crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rhett spent the first morning giving his full testimony to Judge Whitaker, going over every detail of how he'd found Lillian, what she'd told him, how they'd fled through the mountains. The judge listened without interruption, taking careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Mara testified next, describing the men who'd taken Lillian, their words, their threats. Her voice was steady, despite the tears that streaked her face when she talked about watching them ride away with the woman who'd become like a grandmother to her. Even Josie was questioned, gently, with Rhett sitting beside her. She told the judge about the stories Lillian had read to her, about how Lillian had called her brave, about the promise that she'd be their grandmother if they'd have her. "And will you?" Whitaker asked softly. "Have her as your grandmother?" "Yes," Josie said with absolute certainty. "Because she's family now, and families don't give up on each other." Whitaker's expression softened for just a moment. "No, they don't." By afternoon, Marshal Cooper returned with news. His men had located Gideon Blackstone's residence, a grand house on the outskirts of Helena, surrounded by walls and guards. Lillian was being held there, they were certain, though they hadn't been able to get close enough to confirm her condition. "We've also identified at least 7 of Blackstone's associates operating in Helena," Cooper said, spreading a map across Whitaker's desk. "Doctors who falsified birth certificates, lawyers who processed the illegal adoptions, even a county clerk who altered records. This operation is extensive, Your Honor. We're going to need significant force to take them all down simultaneously." "How many marshals can you muster?" Whitaker asked. 20, maybe 25 if I call in deputies from surrounding counties. But Blackstone has his own security, hired guns, at least a dozen of them. This could get bloody." "Yet then we minimize the bloodshed," Whitaker said firmly. "We go in with overwhelming force, give them no choice but to surrender. And we do it Christmas Eve." Rhett's head snapped up. "Christmas Eve? That's tomorrow night." "Exactly." Whitaker's smile was cold. "Blackstone will be hosting his annual Christmas gala. All of Helena's elite will be there, including several of his conspirators. They'll be relaxed, celebrating, not expecting law enforcement to crash their party. We arrest them all at once in front of witnesses, with no chance for them to scatter or destroy evidence." "And Dr. Ward?" Rhett pressed. "What about her?" "A separate team will extract her while we're making the arrests," Cooper said. "Small group, fast-moving. They'll get her out before Blackstone's security even realizes what's happening." It was a good plan, Rhett had to admit, but it meant another full day of waiting, another day of Lillian in Gideon's custody, another day of not knowing if she was alive or suffering or already dead. That night, unable to sleep, Rhett found himself in the hotel dining room nursing coffee long after his children had gone to bed. He was staring into the dark liquid, thinking about everything that had led to this moment, when a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" He looked up to find Sheriff Collins standing there, snow dusting his shoulders, a tired smile on his weathered face. "Tom!" Rhett stood, gripped his friend's hand. "What are you doing here?" "Got word from Marshal Cooper that you'd made it to Helena. Figured I'd ride up, see if you needed anything." Collins settled into the chair across from him, signaled for coffee. "Hell of a journey you made, Rhett. Hell of a thing you did." "Haven't done anything yet. Not until Lillian's safe." "You got those documents to Judge Whitaker. You kept your children alive through mountains in winter while being hunted. That's not nothing." Collins accepted his coffee from the waitress, took a long drink. "Your ranch is fine, by the way. Been keeping an eye on it like I promised. Stock's being fed, house is locked up tight." "Thank you." Rhett felt a weight lift he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "I wasn't sure we'd ever see it again." "You will. And when you do, you'll have quite a story to tell." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Collins spoke again, his voice lower. "Cooper briefed me on the plan for tomorrow night, asked if I wanted to be part of the raid. And I said yes. Figured you might want someone you know watching your back." Collins met his eyes. "You're planning on being there, aren't you, when they go after Blackstone?" Rhett didn't answer immediately. He'd been thinking about exactly that question since Whitaker had explained the plan. His rational mind said he should stay with his children, keep them safe, let the marshals handle it. But his heart said Lillian had sacrificed herself to save them, and he owed her more than hiding in a hotel room while others fought. "I have to be there," he said finally. "She went into danger for us. I can't let her face rescue without being part of it." "Thought you might say that." Collins pulled something from his coat, a deputy's badge. Cooper authorized me to deputize you temporarily. Make it official-like. Your children will be under guard here at the hotel, safe as houses, and you'll be with the extraction team going after Dr. Ward." Rhett took the badge, felt its weight in his palm. It was just metal, just a symbol, but it represented something more. Official sanction, legal authority, the right to fight alongside men who'd sworn to uphold justice. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we've got Dr. Ward safe and Blackstone in chains." The next day was Christmas Eve, and Helena was transformed. Despite the cold, despite the snow, the town was alive with celebration. Storefronts were decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. Children ran through the streets laughing. Church bells rang out across the valley, calling the faithful to evening services. It felt surreal, this normal, joyful Christmas happening, while Rhett knew that by nightfall, violence would shatter the peace. While somewhere in that grand house on the hill, Lillian waited for either rescue or death. Rhett spent the morning with his children, trying to give them as much normalcy as possible. They had Christmas breakfast at the hotel, real eggs and bacon and fresh bread that made Josie's eyes go wide with delight. Mara's ankle was healing, and the doctor had said she'd be walking normally within a few weeks. Eli had found a book in the hotel library and was reading with the intense focus he brought to everything. Josie played with her doll, humming Christmas carols softly. They were healing. Despite everything, despite the trauma and fear and hardship, they were healing. "Pa?" Josie looked up from her doll. "Will Grandma Lillian be with us for Christmas?" Rhett's throat tightened. "I hope so, sweetheart." "She has to be." Josie's voice was fierce. "It wouldn't be Christmas without her. She's family." "Yes," Rhett agreed, pulling her into his lap. "She is." Around 2 in the afternoon, Marshal Cooper assembled his team in a warehouse at the edge of town. 23 men total, all armed, all grim-faced and ready. Rhett stood among them, feeling both out of place and exactly where he needed to be. "Here's how this works," Cooper said, pointing to a diagram of Blackstone's house. "Main force goes in the front during the gala. We'll have warrants for Blackstone and 17 of his associates who will be in attendance. Judge Whitaker himself will be leading that group. He wants to personally serve the warrants and see the looks on their faces when their world comes down." A few men chuckled darkly at that. "Extraction team is smaller, 6 men including Dawson and Collins. You'll go in through the servants' entrance here, in the back. Dr. Ward is being held in the East Wing, 2nd floor, according to our intelligence. Get in, get her, get out. If you encounter resistance, you're authorized to use necessary force, but the goal is speed and stealth, not a gunfight." "What if she's not where your intelligence says?" one of the deputies asked. "Then you search until you find her, but you do it fast and you stay ahead of any alarm. Once the main arrests start in the ballroom, Blackstone security will be scrambling. Use that chaos." Cooper looked at each man in turn. "Any questions?" Rhett raised his hand. "What happens after? Once we have her, where do we take her?" "Directly to the federal courthouse. She'll give her formal testimony, and that combined with the documents and the arrests should be enough to start dismantling Blackstone's entire network." Cooper's expression was grim. "This isn't just about one man, Dawson. This is about destroying an operation that's been stealing children for years. Dr. Ward's courage made that possible." The hours until dark dragged interminably. Rhett checked his rifle, checked his pistol, checked them again. He thought about his children safe at the hotel under guard. Thought about the promise he'd made to bring Lillian home. Thought about all those stolen children whose names were written in the documents now locked in Judge Whitaker's safe. Finally, as full darkness fell and Christmas Eve celebrations reached their peak across Helena, the teams moved out. The main force approached Blackstone's house openly, a parade of marshals and deputies with warrants and authority. They could hear music from inside, an orchestra playing Christmas songs, laughter and conversation from dozens of guests. The extraction team moved through shadows, circling to the back of the property. The wall was 10 feet high, but they'd brought ladders. One by one they went over, dropping into the meticulously maintained gardens beyond. Rhett's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The servants' entrance was just ahead, a plain door set into the back wall. It should be unlocked. Cooper's intelligence said the staff was moving constantly between the kitchen and the party, carrying food and drink. Collins reached the door first, tested the handle. It opened silently. He looked back at Rhett and nodded. They slipped inside. The servants' corridors were narrow and dimly lit, the walls plain compared to the luxury of the main house. They could hear the party clearly now, music and voices and the clink of crystal glasses. Somewhere in that crowd, Gideon Blackstone was playing the role of gracious host, pretending to be a pillar of the community, while his victim was locked away upstairs. The team moved quickly and quietly up a back staircase. The second floor was darker, quieter, the sounds of the party muffled. They passed several doors, locked storage rooms, unused bedchambers, until they reached the east wing. And there, standing guard outside one particular door, was a single man. He was armed, alert, and when he saw the marshals, he went for his gun. Collins was faster. He closed the distance in 2 strides and clubbed the guard with the butt of his rifle. The man went down hard, unconscious before he hit the floor. "Room's locked," one of the deputies said, trying the handle. "Move aside." Rhett stepped forward, raised his boot, and kicked hard. The door splintered and flew open. The room beyond was small, more cell than bedroom. A single lamp burned on a table, casting weak light across bare walls, a narrow bed, and the figure huddled on it. "Lillian," Rhett breathed. She looked up, and for a moment she didn't seem to recognize him. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. Her hands showed burns and cuts, signs of torture, of interrogation. But when their eyes met, recognition and hope flooded her expression. "Rhett?" Her voice was hoarse, disbelieving. "You're alive. The children are safe. We made it to Helena. We got the documents to Judge Whitaker, and now we're getting you out." He crossed to her, helped her stand. She was shaking, could barely support her own weight. "Can you walk?" "I'll crawl if I have to." Despite her injuries, her voice was strong. "Is it happening? Are they arresting him?" As if in answer, they heard shouting from below. The main force had entered the ballroom, was serving warrants, was beginning the arrests. Gideon's party was over. "It's happening," Collins confirmed. "Now come on, we need to move before—" Gunfire erupted from downstairs. Not the main ballroom, somewhere else in the house. Blackstone's security had engaged the marshals. "Go, go!" Cooper's second-in-command urged. "Back the way we came." They moved as fast as Lillian could manage, half carrying her between Rhett and Collins. Behind them, they could hear more gunfire, shouting, the sounds of a house descending into chaos. The extraction team made it to the servants' staircase, started down, and ran straight into 3 of Blackstone's men coming up. For a frozen instant, both groups stared at each other. Then everyone moved at once. The gunfight in that narrow staircase was brutal in close quarters. Rhett shoved Lillian behind him, brought his rifle up, fired. One of Blackstone's men went down. Collins took out another. But the third got a shot off, and one of the deputies cried out, clutching his shoulder. More of Blackstone's security were coming, drawn by the gunfire. The extraction team was pinned on the stairs, trapped between enemies above and below. "We can't go down," Collins shouted. "Too many of them." "Then we go up." Rhett made a split-second decision. To the roof, cross to the next building, get down that way. It was insane, desperate, and their only chance. The team fought their way back up the stairs, dragging their wounded with them. More gunfire chased them, bullets splintering wood and plaster. They reached the 3rd floor, found a window, and Collins smashed it open with his rifle butt. Cold air and snow blew in. Outside, Rhett could see the roof, steep, icy, treacherous. But there was another building nearby, maybe 15 feet away, with a lower roofline they could potentially jump to. "Ladies first," Rhett said to Lillian, trying for levity despite the terror clawing at his chest. She looked at him, looked at the roof, and incredibly, she smiled. "I've come too far to die now." She climbed out onto the roof, moving with more strength than Rhett would have thought possible. The rest of the team followed, bullets still flying behind them. The roof was as treacherous as it looked. Ice-covered tiles, steep pitch, nothing to hold on to. One slip meant a 3-story fall onto frozen ground. They made their way across, weapons slung across their backs, hands and feet scrambling for purchase. Below, they could see the front of the house, marshals leading men out in chains, Gideon's guests standing in shocked clusters in the snow, Judge Whitaker directing operations with calm authority. They'd done it. The raid had succeeded. Blackstone was being arrested along with his conspirators. Now they just had to survive long enough to see it. The gap between buildings loomed ahead, 15 feet across, 10 feet down to the other roof. Doable, maybe, if they were lucky. Collins went first, got a running start, and launched himself across the gap. He landed hard, rolled, came up waving them on. The deputies followed one by one, all making it, though one landed badly and came up limping. Rhett looked at Lillian. "Can you do this?" She looked at the gap, looked back at him. Her face was set with determination despite her injuries. "I didn't survive Gideon Blackstone's torture to fall off a roof. Help me get a running start." He did, supporting her as she backed up, then letting go as she sprinted forward and jumped. For a heart-stopping moment she was airborne, arms windmilling, and Rhett thought she'd fall. But Collins caught her on the other side, pulled her to safety. Rhett took his own running start, jumped. A shot rang out behind him. He felt the bullet hit, a punch of impact and burning pain in his side. His jump faltered, and for a terrible moment he was falling, the ground rushing up. Then Collins had his arm, was hauling him onto the roof with strength, born of desperation. Rhett landed hard, gasping, his hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, hot and wet. "You're hit," Collins said tersely. "How bad?" "Bad enough." The pain was intense now, spreading from his side through his entire body. "But I can move. We need to keep going." They made it down off the second building using an external fire ladder, dropping into an alley 2 blocks from Blackstone's house. The sounds of the raid were fading behind them. No more gunfire, just the organized chaos of arrests and securing the scene. They were safe. Rhett sagged against the wall, his vision swimming. The bullet wound was worse than he'd thought. He was losing blood fast, could feel his strength draining away. "We need a doctor," Lillian said, her voice sharp with professional assessment despite her own injuries. "Now, he's going into shock." "There's a clinic 3 blocks from here," one of the deputies said. "Can he make it?" "He'll make it." Lillian's voice was fierce. She positioned herself under Rhett's arm, supporting him. "Because he didn't drag me through mountains and save my life just to die in an alley on Christmas Eve. Move!" The next hour was a blur of pain and disconnected moments. The clinic, bright lights, Lillian's voice giving sharp orders to a startled doctor. The burn of whiskey poured over the wound, the agony of the bullet being extracted. The blessed relief when laudanum finally dulled the worst of the pain. When Rhett finally surfaced from the fog, he found himself lying in a clean bed in a small room. Dawn light was filtering through a window. Christmas morning, he realized hazily. And sitting beside his bed, cleaned up and bandaged, but alive and free, was Lillian Ward. "The children?" he asked immediately, his voice rough. "Safe. Marshal Cooper sent word to the hotel. They're under guard and waiting to see you." Lillian's good eye, the other was still swollen shut, shone with tears. "Rhett, you did it. You got me out. You stopped Gideon. You saved all those children." "We saved them," he corrected weakly. "Couldn't have done it without you, without your courage, your evidence, without your impossible stubborn kindness," Lillian interrupted, her voice breaking. "You found me dying in a blizzard, and instead of turning away, you brought me into your home, into your family. You risked everything. You're worth it." Rhett reached out, took her hand. "Those children are worth it. Justice is worth it." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped. 2 people who'd survived the impossible and come out the other side changed. "What happens now?" Rhett asked finally. "Now?" Lillian's smile was fragile but real. "Now Judge Whitaker prosecutes Gideon Blackstone and everyone involved. Now we start the process of finding all those stolen children and returning them to their families. Now," her voice caught, "now I get to look for Emma, my granddaughter. With the records we recovered, with witnesses coming forward, there's a chance, a real chance we can find her and bring her home." "And after that?" Lillian looked at him for a long moment. "What are you asking, Rhett?" He took a breath, pushed past the pain in his side to say what needed saying. "I'm asking if a lonely ranch in Montana might have room for a doctor who needs a family. I'm asking if 3 children who've adopted you as their grandmother might persuade you to stay. I'm asking—" He had to stop, swallow hard. "I'm asking if you'd consider making this permanent." Tears spilled down Lillian's face, and she gripped his hand tighter. Are you sure? After everything, after all the danger I brought— After everything, Rhett interrupted gently. You taught my children about courage. You gave them someone to care about when they thought they'd never care about anyone again. Josie's laugh came back because of you. Mara learned to trust again. Eli found his voice, and me— His own eyes were burning now. You reminded me that there's more to life than just surviving grief. That sometimes taking a risk, opening your heart, bringing a stranger in from the cold, sometimes that's how we heal. Yes, Lillian whispered. Yes, I'll stay. I'll be part of your family if you'll have me. I'll help raise your children and tend the sick and look for my granddaughter and— She laughed through her tears, and maybe finally stopped running. The door burst open and 3 children tumbled through, Deputy Marshal at their heels trying to hold them back. But nothing could have stopped Josie, Eli, and Mara when they saw their father alive and their grandmother free. Pa! Josie launched herself at the bed, and Rhett caught her with his good arm, held her close while she sobbed against his chest. Careful, the deputy warned. He's injured. I'm fine, Rhett said, and for the first time in a long time he meant it. He was wounded and exhausted, and they'd just survived something that should have killed them. But he was fine. They were all fine. Eli and Mara crowded close, Mara crying openly, Eli trying not to, but failing. And Lillian gathered them all in, her arms around all 3 children, her face transformed by joy and relief and love. Grandma! Josie pulled back just enough to look at Lillian. You're home! It's Christmas, and you're home, and we're all together! Yes, sweetheart, Lillian kissed the top of her head. I'm home. We all are. Marshal Cooper appeared in the doorway, his face lined with fatigue but lit with triumph. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to know. We've made 43 arrests total. Blackstone, his security team, the doctors and lawyers involved, even 3 county officials. Judge Whitaker is calling it the largest criminal conspiracy takedown in Montana Territory history. And the children? Lillian asked urgently. The ones who were stolen? We've already located 18 of them, and we're working on the rest. We have names, locations, families who will be reunited. Cooper's smile was real and warm. You did that, Dr. Ward. Your courage, your evidence, you gave those children their lives back. Lillian pressed her hands to her face and wept. Not the desperate, frightened tears she'd cried so often during her years of running, but tears of relief, of accomplishment, of finally having her nightmare end. There's more, Cooper continued, pulling out a piece of paper. We found records of where Emma was placed. Your granddaughter. She's in a family in Colorado Springs, being raised by a banker named Morrison and his wife. They were told she was an orphan, that the adoption was legal. They had no idea. Lillian's head snapped up. She's alive? You're certain? I'm certain. And Judge Whitaker has already signed an order for her return to your custody. We'll have marshals escorting her here within 2 weeks. For a moment, Lillian couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 3 years of searching, of fighting, of surviving, and now her granddaughter, Catherine's daughter, the child she'd thought lost forever. Thank you, she finally managed. Thank you. Cooper nodded, then addressed Rhett. As for you, Dawson, you're a damn fool for jumping between buildings with a gunshot wound, but you're also a hero. Judge Whitaker wants to officially commend you and your family for your service, and I want to offer you that deputy position permanently, if you're interested. I'm a rancher, Rhett said. I belong on my land with my family, but Tom here— He nodded to Collins. He's the lawman you want. Best sheriff Montana's got. Collins ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. Fair enough? Cooper turned to leave, then paused. Merry Christmas, all of you. You've earned it. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of healing and happiness. Rhett recovered slowly, the bullet wound mending under Lillian's expert medical care. The children thrived in the relative safety and comfort of Helena, though they all spoke longingly of home, of the ranch, of their normal lives. Gideon Blackstone's trial was swift and brutal. With the evidence Lillian had gathered, with the testimony of dozens of victims and witnesses, there was no question of his guilt. He was sentenced to hang, along with 3 of his closest associates. The others received prison terms ranging from 10 to 30 years. On the day the sentence was read, Lillian sat in the courtroom and watched the man who'd destroyed her life, who'd killed her daughter, who'd stolen her granddaughter, finally face justice. When the judge banged his gavel and pronounced the death sentence, she felt the weight of 3 years of fear and grief finally lift from her shoulders. Afterwards, outside the courthouse, Rhett found her standing in the snow, her face turned up to the winter sun. "How does it feel?" he asked quietly. "Like I can breathe again," she said. "Like I can finally stop running and start living." 2 days later, a carriage arrived at their hotel. Marshall Cooper stepped out first, then turned to help down a small girl with dark hair and Lillian's blue eyes. She was 3 years old, confused and scared, clutching a cloth doll. "Emma?" Lillian's voice shook. The little girl looked at her, uncertain. "Are you my real grandma?" "I am." Lillian knelt in the snow, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama's mama, and I've been looking for you for so long, sweetheart. So very long." Emma studied her gravely, then reached out and touched Lillian's face. "The marshal said you fought bad men to find me." "I did. And I always will. I'll always fight to keep you safe." "Okay." And just like that, with the simple acceptance of childhood, Emma stepped forward into Lillian's arms. Watching from the hotel window, Josie tugged on Rhett's sleeve. "Is that our cousin now? Emma?" Rhett looked down at his daughter's hopeful face and smiled. "Yes, that's your cousin Emma." "Good." Josie's grin was bright as sunshine. "Our family was too small. Now it's just right." They left Helena a week later, a strange caravan heading back toward the ranch. Rhett and Lillian in the lead wagon with Emma and Josie, Mara and Eli following in a second wagon loaded with supplies. Sheriff Collins rode alongside, having taken a few days off to escort them home safely. The journey that had been so desperate and dangerous going out was peaceful going back. They traveled slowly, stopping often, taking time to rest and heal. The mountains that had nearly killed them now seemed almost friendly, the snow-covered peaks beautiful rather than threatening. When they finally crested the last ridge and looked down at the Dawson Ranch, Rhett felt emotion well up in his chest. Home. They were home. The house stood exactly as they'd left it, the barn solid and strong, the fences still standing despite the winter storms. It looked small and plain and absolutely perfect. "That's where we live?" Emma asked, peering out from under the wagon cover. "That's where we all live now," Lillian confirmed, hugging her granddaughter close. "Our home." They settled back into ranch life gradually, finding new rhythms, new patterns. Lillian claimed the spare room permanently, turning it into a combination bedroom and medical office. Word spread that a real doctor had settled in the area, and soon people were riding in from neighboring ranches seeking treatment. Emma adjusted with the resilience of childhood, bonding quickly with Josie, following Eli around like a shadow, gradually learning to trust that these people who called themselves family wouldn't disappear like everyone else in her short life had. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they all healed. Mara's ankle mended, and with it some of the walls around her heart. She'd been trying so hard to be the adult to replace her mother, but with Lillian there, she could finally just be 16 again, could laugh and be silly and make mistakes without feeling like the whole family would collapse if she wasn't perfect. Eli came out of his shell bit by bit, talking more, drawing pictures of their mountain adventure that were both terrifying and triumphant. He'd survived something huge, had been brave when it mattered, and that knowledge gave him confidence he'd never had before. Josie thrived with Emma as a playmate and Lillian as a grandmother. The sadness that had shadowed her since Sarah's death finally lifted, replaced by the natural exuberance of childhood. And Rhett discovered that a house full of noise and laughter and life was exactly what he'd needed. That opening his door to a stranger in a blizzard had given him back something he'd thought lost forever, a future he could look forward to instead of just endure. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and turning the prairie green. On a warm April afternoon, Rhett stood on his porch watching his children play in the yard. Josie and Emma picking flowers, Eli teaching them the names of birds, Mara reading under a tree with a kitten in her lap. Lillian came out to stand beside him, drying her hands on her apron. She just finished setting a bone for the Henderson boy, who'd fallen off a horse and would be fine in a few weeks. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rhett looked at her in surprise. "For what?" "For pulling a freezing, bleeding stranger onto your horse last December. For bringing me home, for giving me back everything I thought I'd lost." "You gave us just as much," Rhett replied. "Maybe more." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children play, watching the sun paint gold across the mountains where they'd fought for their lives and found family in the process. "Do you think Emma will remember?" Lillian asked. "Her mother, her real life before?" "I don't know, maybe bits and pieces." Rhett considered. "But I think what matters is what she'll remember going forward. That she's loved, that she's safe, that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands with you in the storm. Like you stood with me." "Like we stood together," he corrected. A carriage came up the road, Judge Whitaker and Marshal Cooper, making good on their promise to visit. Behind them rode Sheriff Collins, who'd become a regular fixture at the ranch, drawn by good food and better company. "Company's here," Josie shouted, racing toward the carriage with Emma at her heels. The men brought news from Helena. More children had been found and returned to families. More of Blackstone's associates had been arrested. The criminal network that had thrived for so long was completely dismantled. And they brought something else, too. "This came for you," Whitaker said, handing Lillian an envelope. "From the territorial governor. He's officially reinstating your medical license and issuing a formal apology for your wrongful commitment. He's also authorized compensation for what you suffered." Lillian took the envelope with shaking hands. "I never thought... I didn't do this for recognition." "We know," Cooper said gently, "but you deserve it anyway. You and the Dawson family. You made a difference. You saved lives." That evening, after their guests had left and the children were in bed, Rhett and Lillian sat on the porch watching the stars come out. The April air was cool, but not cold, full of the promise of summer. "I have something for you," Rhett said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. "Been working on it for a while." Lillian opened the box and found inside a beautiful carved brooch, a pine tree, its branches reaching upward, intricate and detailed. "Rhett, it's beautiful. Did you make this?" "Eli helped. We figured..." He paused, suddenly uncertain. "The pine tree, because that's where we found each other, in the storm. Because pines survive winter and come back stronger, because we survived," Lillian finished softly. She pinned the brooch to her dress, over her heart. "Thank you. I'll treasure it always." They sat together as the night deepened, and the children's peaceful breathing drifted through the open windows. Inside, Emma slept in Josie's room, the two girls curled up together. Eli was at his desk drawing by lamplight. Mara was reading in bed, her ankle propped up and healing perfectly. A family. Broken pieces that had found each other in a blizzard and become something whole. "Do you think Sarah would approve?" Lillian asked quietly. "Of me being here, being part of your family?" Rhett thought about his wife, about her generous heart, and her insistence on always doing what was right even when it was hard. He thought about the promise he'd made to her before she died, that he'd teach their children to be good, to be kind, to stand up for people who needed help. "I think," he said slowly, "that Sarah would say we did exactly what we should have done, that we chose compassion over fear, family over safety, justice over silence. And I think she'd be proud of all of us." I hope so." Lillian leaned back in her chair, looking up at the stars. "I hope Catherine's proud too, that I finally stopped running, finally stood and fought, finally brought Emma home to family." "I know she is," Rhett said with certainty. "Both of them are. Sarah and Catherine. I think they're probably up there together right now, pleased as can be that we figured it out." Lillian smiled through fresh tears, but these were the good kind, the healing kind. "A strange family we make, a widower, a fugitive doctor, 3 grieving children, and 1 stolen granddaughter." "The best kind of family," Rhett corrected. "The kind that chooses each other, the kind that stands together no matter what, the kind that doesn't give up." Inside, a clock struck 9. Tomorrow they'd wake early for chores, for breakfast, for the 1,000 small tasks that made up ranch life. Emma would learn to gather eggs. Josie would practice her reading. Eli would check the fence line. Mara would help Lillian with patience. Normal life. Beautiful, ordinary, precious, normal life. "Merry Christmas, Rhett," Lillian said softly, though it was April. "I know it's the wrong season, but it's exactly the right season," he interrupted, understanding perfectly. Because Christmas wasn't just a date on a calendar. It was about miracles and hope and new beginnings. It was about finding light in darkness and family in strangers. It was about second chances and impossible rescues and love that survived everything thrown at it. "Merry Christmas, Lillian," he replied. "Welcome home." And there, on a Montana ranch under endless stars, 2 wounded souls and 4 broken hearts found exactly what they needed: each other and the courage to begin again. The end.